You cheated on me while I was on a business trip, didn't you? We're getting a divorce. Give the house to my parents and leave right now. Jackson's voice boomed through the phone, a storm of accusation and anger. But I wasn't taken aback. I knew he was grasping at straws, trying to find a reason to blame me for his own failings. I already sold it, I replied coolly, feeling his emotions teeter on the other end. He thought he could outwit me, but he underestimated my intuition. I simmered with fury initially, but his feeble attempt at deception only made me smirk. It was my turn now. This is the tale of how my deceitful husband tried to manipulate me and how I outmaneuvered him. My name is Olivia, a 28-year-old working mom. I've been at the college store job since I graduated from junior college at 20. Jackson, 2 years my senior, now toils away in an office at a construction firm. But when we first crossed paths 3 years ago, he was adrift, jobless. He'd abandoned his first post-college job, claiming it wasn't right for him. Since then, he drifted between gigs, often idling. That's when he swept me off my feet, proposing in mere months. Okay, but there's a condition, I stated firmly, noting the worry etched on Jackson's face. What is it? He asked, apprehension creeping into his voice. You need to find a stable job. Otherwise, marriage is out of the question. We need to think about our future, I explained, my tone resolute. Oh, come on. Of course, but you're working, so there's no rush, right? Jackson attempted to brush off the seriousness of the situation. My parents would worry if I married a man without a job. Find one before we get married, I insisted, my gaze unwavering. Seeing my stern expression, Jackson sighed in resignation. All right, I'll find one. Then you'll marry me. Yes, and so it'll be, I affirmed, though uncertainty lingered in my mind. Reluctantly, Jackson embarked on his job hunt, eventually securing a position in an office at a construction company. We tied the knot. Back then, I viewed Jackson as somewhat careless about money and work. He'd quit jobs impulsively and didn't always grasp the gravity of financial matters, even in the context of marriage. Yet he was receptive when I spoke seriously. I believed that after marriage, I could guide him, fill in his gaps, and in turn, he would complement my weaknesses. Together, we'd form a strong partnership. But life proved to be more complicated than I anticipated. Jackson's apparent disregard for financial matters appeared to be a trait passed down from his parents. Around a year into our marriage, during our search for a house and discussions about securing a mortgage, Jackson dropped a bombshell. I might not be able to get a loan, he disclosed casually, leaving me stunned. What? I exclaimed, seeking clarification. Nonchalantly, he explained, I looked into it, and because I hadn't been at my job for long, I might need a guarantor for the loan. The only person I could ask is my dad, but he's dealing with significant gambling debts, so he probably can't be a guarantor. His revelation left me dumbfounded, especially with the contract and the real estate agent right in front of us. Yet Jackson seemed unfazed. If we put the house in your name, it'll be fine, right? You've been at your job forever, so you can get the loan. We'll both pay it off. It's just a formality, he suggested casually. That's not the point. Why didn't you discuss this with me? This is a big deal for me too. I'm not even prepared with the paperwork, I retorted, frustration bubbling within me. Though he apologized, his contrition felt hollow, lacking sincerity. Despite my urge to argue, I refrained from escalating the situation, considering the already prepared contract and the presence of the agent. Reluctantly, I hastily gathered the necessary documents, such as my income statement, for the loan application. In a spur-of-the-moment decision, I impulsively bought the house under my name. As I hurried to finalize the paperwork, a wave of anxiety washed over me. Could I truly envision a future with this man? Perhaps I should have simply put a halt to the proceedings instead of rushing to prepare the documents. Adding to my mounting anxiety was the looming issue with my in-laws. The other day, I had a talk with Dad. Jackson began one evening. He mentioned that he might lose the house due to the debts I mentioned earlier. He's considering moving in with us. That's all right, isn't it? What? Why would you even consider that? I responded sharply, hoping to convey the seriousness of the situation, but Jackson seemed unfazed. Well, he's in a tough spot. My brother is single, but he's working overseas. I'm Dad's only option. Shouldn't we discuss this properly? Maybe he can stay with us temporarily until he finds another place, but committing to having him live with us permanently is a major decision, Jackson reasoned, his expression troubled. You're just trying to avoid the issue. If he stays, we can split the living expenses. You're always complaining about money, he countered. You mean the money you never contribute? You promised we'd split the mortgage, but it's only coming out of my paycheck. You haven't paid your share. In marriage, finances are shared. It's not just your money, it's ours. It's only deducted from your account because the house is in your name. Stop being so self-centered, I admonished, frustration simmering beneath my words. My frustration boiled over, and I raised my voice, demanding answers. Jackson's response was simply, I hate talking about money, before abruptly leaving the room. These clashes became all too common, with Jackson consistently brushing off my concerns and retreating, leaving issues unresolved. Yet despite his aversion to discussing finances, Jackson wasn't entirely idle when it came to his family's predicaments. His role in construction site administration brought him into frequent contact with real estate contracts, leading him to consult a specific agency about the potential sale of his family home and the steps involved in securing the best deal. I've been considering selling the house for a good price, but I'm unsure about the process. What steps should I take if I decide to sell down the line? This topic was a recurring theme in our conversations. It was somewhat reassuring to know that I wasn't alone in contemplating these matters. However, the persistent notion of his family living with us post-sale always lingered in the back of my mind, causing unease. Jackson started holding meetings with real estate agencies and my parents-in-law behind my back, and his weekends away from home became more frequent. Eventually, he had to embark on a business trip that would keep him away for several months. The project required him to stay near the construction site until its completion. At the time, I didn't realize it, but the power struggle between us had already commenced. A few days after Jackson's departure, I decided to treat myself to tea after a shopping trip. As I entered the cafe, I was greeted by a familiar face. Recollecting past encounters, I recognized him as someone Jackson had once brought home. He worked at a real estate company, and Jackson had mentioned him as Samuel, a young employee who was relatively new to the company with less than a year under his belt. Oh, hello. You've been to our house before, right? I greeted him with a hint of recognition. Yes, I apologize for dropping by unannounced and even staying for a meal. My apologies, Samuel replied sheepishly. No worries. I should have been more hospitable, I assured him, gesturing for us to sit down and have tea together. Samuel proved to be very friendly and surprisingly sensible, especially considering his youth. We engaged in pleasant conversation over tea before parting ways. At that moment, I could have fathomed what would follow. Little did I know, this seemingly innocuous encounter would later be twisted into an accusation of infidelity. It happened when Jackson confronted me. You cheated on me while I was away, didn't you? We're getting a divorce. Give the house to my parents and leave now. His words hit me like a bolt of lightning. The first thought that crossed my mind was disbelief. Could it be true? Had Jackson spread rumors about me cheating, all to justify a divorce? The shocking revelation came from an unexpected source. Samuel, the very man Jackson falsely accused me of having an affair with. The day after our tea, Samuel showed up at my doorstep unannounced. I apologized for the sudden visit. About yesterday, Jackson asked me to get close to you, he confessed, his words catching me off guard. Shocked and confused, I invited him inside and listened intently as he unraveled his tale. Jackson had orchestrated a deceitful plan to frame me for cheating in order to expedite a divorce. He had enlisted Samuel to manufacture evidence against me. There were two underlying motives behind Jackson's scheme. Firstly, he coveted our house and sought to wrest it from my possession. Concerned about his parents' property, he believed it would be simpler to reside there with them. However, my objection to the arrangement thwarted his plan, leading him to concoct a scheme to evict me and claim the house for himself. Secondly, Jackson was engaged in an extramarital affair. Under the guise of discussing matters with my parents-in-law, he spent weekends with his mistress. Consumed by his infatuation, he viewed me, his wife, as an impediment to his happiness. By framing me for infidelity, he aimed to secure financial compensation in the divorce settlement. I always underestimated Jackson's intelligence, but he certainly proved to be cunning in the worst ways. Despicable, I muttered under my breath, my disdain evident. Samuel offered his apologies, but I had no intention of aiding Jackson in his deceitful scheme. I refused to be manipulated for such nefarious purposes. Thus, I feigned cooperation while secretly plotting to outmaneuver him. Taking advantage of Samuel's real estate expertise, I listened as he provided various suggestions. Eventually, he proposed a bold idea. You should sell the house while Jackson is away on his trip. When I finally uttered the words, I sold it, Jackson's reaction was a mixture of confusion and disbelief. What? He managed to sputter, clearly at a loss for words. Seeing his stunned expression, I resolved to twist the knife further. I recounted everything I learned from Samuel, including the recordings he provided. You were attempting to fabricate evidence to make it appear as though I was having an affair with him. If we divorce now, I can pursue alimony and court proceedings, I explained calmly, watching Jackson's bewildered expression as he repeated, Why? Why? But I had another revelation to share. You might not have realized, but Samuel isn't just an ordinary employee. He's actually the son of the company's CEO. Jackson's shock was palpable. What? How could I have missed that? He exclaimed, his confusion deepening. It was clear he had underestimated the gravity of the situation. Do you not realize that Samuel shares the same last name as the CEO? How could you overlook that? I questioned, incredulous at his obliviousness. Well, Samuel's last name isn't exactly rare. Jackson attempted to defend himself weakly. Wait, are you serious? He added, his incredulity growing. No, I'm serious, I asserted firmly, noting the shock in Jackson's expression. Samuel's company held significant importance to Jackson as one of his key clients. Additionally, they had provided crucial assistance with his family home matters. If news of his deceit reached the company's boss, Jackson would undoubtedly find himself in serious trouble. As it turned out, Samuel had already reported the situation. Hey, come on. All right, I'll look into it. If you're lying, I'll find out soon enough, Jackson responded before abruptly ending the call. It didn't take long for him to realize the gravity of the situation and the irreversible damage he had caused. Subsequently, the real estate company owned by Samuel's father refused to engage in any business dealings with Jackson or offer him advice regarding his family home. With no other options, Jackson was forced to return to his family home after concluding his business trip. Meanwhile, since I had sold my house, Samuel had graciously introduced me to an affordable apartment, leaving me with no concerns. As I initiated the divorce proceedings, Jackson persistently reached out, pleading for forgiveness. I'm sorry, Olivia. Please forgive me, he implored. It's too late now. You attempted to manipulate someone into trapping me. Why should I believe anything you say? I retorted, my resolve unyielding. Don't say that. Once we're divorced, you can marry that other woman, right? That's what you wanted, isn't it? I questioned, hoping to reaffirm his intentions. Yes, but she apparently had someone else she liked and dumped me. What a pathetic story, Jackson admitted with a hint of bitterness. Even if that's the case, don't expect me to welcome you back with open arms, I responded firmly, my patience wearing thin. With a sigh, I ended the call. Despite my efforts to keep my current address undisclosed, Jackson's relentless barrage of calls persisted. Each time, he'd plead, Don't leave me. Help me, I'll be a good husband, his promises ringing hollow in my ears. I grew increasingly exasperated with his empty pleas. Once the divorce was finalized, I resolved to sever all ties, deleting his number, blocking him on WhatsApp, and cutting off communication entirely. Yet, the unwelcome appeals didn't end with Jackson. Even my mother-in-law reached out, begging, Please, Olivia. We'll be lost without you. It's not the house we wanted. It's you, isn't it? But there's no house left, I pointed out, feeling a mix of frustration and disbelief. We didn't just desire the house. We're not that heartless. Come back, and you'll understand, she urged, her tone pleading. You were after the money, weren't you? I accused, feeling the surge of resentment. That's not true. You're being unfair. You tried to pressure me into living with you, and when I refused, Jackson attempted to manipulate me to gain an advantage in the divorce, she countered defensively. I can't trust someone like that. It's evident that your motives revolve around money, I asserted firmly, refusing to yield to Jackson's pleas. As I continued to reject his advances, my father-in-law dialed my number, his tone dripping with arrogance. Isn't it your duty as a daughter-in-law to show some respect to my wife? Are you seriously saying no? Isn't this all because of the debt you accumulated? He demanded, his voice growing increasingly strident. With each word, his accusations stung, and when I responded with equal resolve, his tone turned venomous. You heartless woman, abandoning your mother-in-law in her time of need and shifting blame onto her. I'll make you pay for your cruelty. He bellowed into the phone, the volume causing my ears to ring. Unable to tolerate his threats any longer, I abruptly ended the call and, clutching the recorded audio as evidence, sought counsel from my lawyer. It transpired that my father-in-law's menacing words could be construed as a threat. Armed with this knowledge, I informed Jackson that I would pursue legal action if he refused to consent to the divorce. In a state of panic, Jackson reluctantly agreed to the divorce, allowing me to sever ties with his tumultuous family once and for all. With the legal proceedings finalized, I found solace in the newfound freedom from their oppressive influence. However, the consequences of his actions soon caught up with Jackson. His reputation at work suffered, resulting in diminished responsibilities and a significant loss of trust from his superiors. Furthermore, the unresolved debt issue forced him to sell his family home at a depreciated value, leaving him and his parents to reside in a modest apartment. With his reduced role at work, Jackson's income dwindled, compounded by the financial strain of providing support to his dependent parents. The burden of alimony payments only exacerbated his financial woes. These unfortunate circumstances came to my attention through Samuel, who remained confident despite the tumultuous events. It was through Samuel's suggestion that I found a potential opportunity to leverage my customer service skills from my previous job at a clothing store. He proposed a position in his company's HR department, offering a chance for me to rebuild my life on my own terms. After discovering an opening that required strong communication skills, I deliberated extensively and sought advice before ultimately accepting the position at the real estate company. This decision marked a significant shift in my career path.
I'm not your ATM, Vanessa. This has to stop. The confrontation erupted in our once peaceful living room. I, Jenna, stood defiantly before my mother-in-law, Vanessa, and my husband, Ethan. Vanessa lounged on the couch, her face a twisted mixture of surprise and contempt, while Ethan lingered awkwardly, his expression blank. "This is my son's house, Jenna. I'll spend as I please," Vanessa snapped back, her voice cold and dismissive. It felt like a bad dream. Ethan and I had begun our journey together, filled with dreams and love, but those days were now just a distant echo. The man I had married, once so loving and understanding, had transformed into someone unrecognizable, parroting his mother's harsh words and ignoring my pleas. "Ethan, you see this, right? You understand how wrong this is?" I implored, turning to my husband, desperate for an ally. But Ethan just shrugged, his eyes void of the connection we once shared. "Jenna, she's my mother. What do you expect me to do?" he uttered, his voice empty of the affection that once comforted me. Realization washed over me like a cold shower. I was alone in this battle. To them, I was merely a means to an end, a dispensable part of their twisted family dynamic. I knew I had to break free. "All right," I said, my voice surprisingly calm. "I'll leave. And Ethan, we're done. I want a divorce." The room fell into a tense silence, the gravity of my words settling like dust. Ethan's face registered shock, a fleeting glimpse of the man I once fell in love with, but it quickly faded, replaced by an emotionless mask. "Fine, Jenna, what you need to, but don't think you're walking away with anything," he responded, his tone icy. I walked to the door, each step lighter than the last, leaving behind the oppressive weight of this house. Vanessa's voice, laced with malice, trailed after me. "Goodbye, Jenna. We'll be just fine without your drama." I didn't glance back. Exiting that house marked the end of a painful chapter and the beginning of an uncertain yet liberating journey. The cool evening breeze felt like freedom, washing over me with promises of a new beginning. I had no clear plan for what lay ahead, but I was certain of one thing. I would never allow myself to be diminished or disrespected again. This was the start of my story, on my own terms. Walking away from Ethan and Vanessa, my mind involuntarily drifted back to the beginnings of our story, contrasting sharply with the bitter end. I first met Ethan at work, where his charm and wit quickly captivated me. Our office romance blossomed into a deep connection, or so I thought. We shared dreams of a future together, dreams that now lay shattered at my feet. Our courtship was a whirlwind of affection and promises. Ethan often spoke of his difficult upbringing, raised solely by Vanessa after his father's departure. I saw a vulnerability in him that resonated with me, as I too had faced my share of hardships. But the Ethan I knew then was not the man I had just left behind. The first warning sign came the day I met Vanessa. Her demeanor was cold, her words sharp. "Ethan could do better," she had said, scrutinizing me with a judgmental gaze. Ethan, instead of defending me, chuckled nervously and changed the subject. I brushed it off, attributing it to first meeting nerves. How wrong I was. Our wedding plans were modest, but Ethan's excitement was palpable. He wanted a big celebration, to make up for the lackluster moments of his childhood. I admired his desire to turn past pains into joyful memories. But as the wedding drew closer, our differences became more pronounced. I had risen to a managerial position at work, a fact that Ethan initially celebrated. But soon his support turned to envy. Conversations about my work achievements became strained, and Ethan's demeanor grew cold. He started suggesting I should leave my job to focus on our home life, echoing Vanessa's archaic views on marriage. Then came the ultimatum. "You need to choose, Jenna. Your career or our family," Ethan said one evening, his tone unyielding. "But why can't I have both? Why does it have to be a choice?" I responded, bewildered by his demand. Vanessa, who had increasingly become a permanent fixture in our home, chimed in. "A woman's place is in the home, Jenna. You're neglecting your duties as a wife." Their words stung like a slap. I realized then that their vision of our future was vastly different from mine. They wanted a version of me that fit their narrow expectations, a version I could never be. The final straw was Ethan's announcement of Vanessa moving in with us permanently. A decision made without my consent, a blatant disregard for our partnership. I felt like a stranger in my own home, my opinions and feelings irrelevant. As these memories flooded back, anger and hurt surged within me. How could I have been so blind? How could I have ignored the glaring signs of Ethan's inability to stand up to Vanessa? I was nothing more than a means to an end for them, a convenient addition to their twisted family dynamic. But no more. The Jenna that walked away from that house was not the same one who entered it. I was stronger now, wiser, and fueled by a desire for retribution. Ethan and Vanessa would soon learn that their actions had consequences they could never have anticipated. I was determined to make them pay for every tear, every moment of self-doubt they had caused me. My journey of revenge had just begun. The days following my departure from Ethan and Vanessa's grip were a blur of emotions. As I navigated my newfound freedom, the memory of Vanessa moving into our home replayed in my mind, marking the beginning of my unraveling. It was a sunny afternoon when Ethan casually mentioned his mother would be staying with us for a while. The news caught me off guard, but I tried to remain understanding. Vanessa had always been a looming presence in our marriage, but living with her was a challenge I hadn't anticipated. From the day she arrived, Vanessa made it clear that she considered the house her domain. "This place could use a woman's touch, and clearly, you're not up to the task, Jenna," she remarked on her first day, eyeing the decor disdainfully. Her criticism wasn't limited to the house. She found fault in everything I did, from my cooking to the way I dressed. "Ethan, how do you tolerate such bland meals?" she would say, scrunching her nose at the dinners I prepared. Ethan, instead of defending me, would nod in agreement, his silence a dagger to my heart. Her extravagant spending was the most egregious. Designer clothes, expensive jewelry, and lavish parties became the norm. She used the money I earned as though it were hers by right. "A little luxury never hurt anyone, Jenna. You should try it sometime. Maybe then you'd understand," Vanessa sneered one evening, flaunting her new diamond necklace. I tried discussing this with Ethan, but he dismissed my concerns. "Mom's had a tough life, Jenna. She deserves to enjoy herself," he said, ignoring the financial strain her indulgences put on us. The situation reached a boiling point when Vanessa decided to renovate the kitchen without consulting me. "It's just so outdated, Jenna. We need a space more fitting for our lifestyle," she declared, as contractors roamed our home estimating costs. "But this is our home, not just yours. You can't just make these decisions without talking to us." I protested, my frustration boiling over. Vanessa laughed, a cold, harsh sound that echoed in the hollow space that used to be my sanctuary. "Oh, Jenna, when will you learn? This is my son's house, and what I say goes. You're just living here." Ethan's response, or lack thereof, shattered any remaining illusions I had about our relationship. He stood by, a passive observer, as his mother bulldozed over my feelings and our shared life. That night, lying in bed, I realized the full extent of their betrayal. They didn't see me as a partner or even a person. I was just a convenient accessory in their lives, easily discarded and replaced. But I refused to be a victim any longer. As Vanessa's words echoed in my head, a plan began to form. They thought they could control me, use me for their own gain, but they were gravely mistaken. I would take back control, reclaim my life, and in doing so, I would ensure that Vanessa and Ethan felt the sting of their actions, a sting that would leave a lasting mark. My revenge would be meticulous, calculated, and, most importantly, deserved. They had underestimated me for the last time. The weeks that followed were a crescendo of tension and silent battles. Living under the same roof with Ethan and Vanessa, I felt like a stranger in a home that once held the promise of love and companionship. But the true tipping point came unexpectedly, on a day that should have been about celebration, my birthday. The morning of my birthday, I woke up to an empty house. There were no signs of celebration, not even a note. I tried to brush off the disappointment, reminding myself that expecting anything from Ethan and Vanessa was futile. The day dragged on with an eerie quietness until the evening when even Ethan and Vanessa returned, bubbling with excitement. "We have great news." "Jenna!" Ethan exclaimed as they barged in, ignoring my evident dejection. Vanessa's eyes sparkled with a malicious glee. "We're going on a trip, a week in the Bahamas. Just think of the sun, the beaches, the luxury." I stood there, dumbfounded. "You're going on a trip? On my birthday? You didn't even remember." Ethan waved off my shock. "Oh, is it today? Well, happy birthday then. But listen, this trip is going to be amazing. Mom and I have been planning it for weeks." Vanessa chimed in, her voice dripping with faux sympathy. "Oh, Jenna, don't be so childish. Birthdays are just another day. Besides, you should be happy for us. We deserve this break." Their blatant disregard for me, on what should have been a special day, was the final straw. Anger bubbled inside me, a fiery blend of betrayal and hurt. "You're using my money for this trip, aren't you? The money I work hard for." Ethan shrugged, a dismissive gesture that ignited my fury. "Well, someone has to pay for it, and since you're the only one working..." Vanessa laughed, a sound that sent chills down my spine. "Honestly, Jenna, you should be grateful. We're spending your money on something worthwhile. It's not like you have any better use for it." Their words hit me like a physical blow. The audacity to use my hard-earned money for their frivolous pleasures while disregarding my feelings was appalling. I realized then that I was nothing more than a financial resource to them, a means to fund their lavish desires. "I can't believe this. You two are unbelievable," I shouted, my voice trembling with rage. "Calm down, Jenna. It's just money, and it's not like you're doing anything important with it," Ethan said, his tone patronizing. Vanessa smirked, adding insult to injury. "Exactly. Be a good wife and support your husband and his mother. That's your role, after all." Their words echoed in my mind, a cruel reminder of how little they valued me. But their smug faces, their condescending tones ignited something within me. A resolve, a burning desire for retribution. "This is it. I'm done. I refuse to be your personal ATM, your doormat." "You'll regret treating me this way," I vowed, my voice steady with newfound determination. Ethan and Vanessa exchanged amused glances, clearly underestimating the depth of my resolve. But I knew, at that moment, that my journey of revenge had truly begun. They had pushed me to my limits, and now they would face the consequences of their actions. In the days following my decision, I moved into a modest hotel, a temporary sanctuary as I plotted my next steps. The betrayal by Ethan and Vanessa had left a bitter taste, but it also fueled a fire within me, a desire to reclaim my life and exact revenge. I began by consulting a lawyer, meticulously laying out the years of financial exploitation and emotional abuse. The lawyer listened intently, occasionally nodding, his expression a mix of disbelief and sympathy. "We have a strong case here, Jenna. It's clear that you've been taken advantage of. Let's start with filing for divorce and freezing the joint accounts," he suggested. With each step, I felt a piece of my old self return, the Jenna who was confident, who wouldn't let anyone walk over her. I was no longer the woman who tolerated disrespect and manipulation. A few weeks into my hotel stay, my phone rang. It was Ethan, his voice laced with panic. "Jenna, where are you? The bank accounts are frozen, and we can't access any funds." I couldn't help but smile, a cold, satisfying grin. Oh, Ethan, I'm taking back what's mine. You and your mother can't use me as your personal cash machine anymore. There was a pause, and then Ethan's voice grew desperate. Jenna, please, you're overreacting. Let's talk about this. We're a family, after all. Family. The word echoed mockingly in my ears. No, Ethan, we were never a family. You chose your mother over your wife, and now you must face the consequences. As I ended the call, a sense of empowerment washed over me. This was just the beginning. Vanessa and Ethan had underestimated me for far too long. They thought they could control and use me, but I was about to show them just how wrong they were. The next phase of my plan involved exposing their true characters. I reached out to mutual friends and colleagues, sharing my story. The reactions were a mix of shock and support. I always knew Vanessa was difficult, but I had no idea it was this bad, a former colleague said, her voice filled with indignation. Word spread, and soon Ethan and Vanessa's social standing began to crumble. Invitations dwindled, and their once bustling social life faltered. I watched from the sidelines, a bittersweet satisfaction in seeing them isolated, a taste of their own medicine. But the true revenge was yet to come. I had one last card to play, one that would ensure Ethan and Vanessa would never forget the price of their actions. The final move was a legal stroke of genius. Through my lawyer, I initiated a case to claim back the funds Vanessa had squandered. The evidence was overwhelming, and the law was on my side. The day we received the court's decision in my favor was the day I truly felt vindicated. Ethan's pleas for forgiveness and Vanessa's attempts to negotiate fell on deaf ears. They had made their bed, and now they had to lie in it. The financial strain was just a start. I wanted them to feel the same helplessness and despair they had subjected me to. As I prepared to leave the hotel and start anew, I knew that the path ahead would be challenging. But I also knew that I was no longer the same woman who walked into this situation. I was stronger, wiser, and most importantly, free. The day of reckoning had arrived. After weeks of meticulous planning and legal maneuvering, I was ready to confront Ethan and Vanessa directly. I had arranged a meeting under the guise of discussing the divorce and settlement. As I entered the cafe where we agreed to meet, I saw them sitting there, a picture of anxiety. Vanessa's face, usually so composed, was etched with worry. Ethan looked up as I approached, his eyes searching for a sign of leniency. Jenna, thank you for agreeing to meet, Ethan started, his voice unsteady. Look, I know things got out of hand, but we're family. Can't we just put this behind us and start over? I couldn't help but scoff at his audacity. Start over? After everything you and your mother have done? You must be joking. Vanessa interjected, her tone a mix of desperation and cunning. Jenna, dear, let's be reasonable. We all made mistakes, but we can work this out. We're willing to make amends. Their pleas were a stark contrast to their earlier arrogance. It was satisfying to see them squirm, to witness the shift in power. Mistakes? You call years of manipulation and financial abuse a mistake? I retorted, my voice firm. You two have shown no remorse for your actions. Now, you will face the consequences. Ethan's face paled, a realization dawning on him. Jenna, please, we need the money, the lifestyle, the reputation. We can't lose everything. Vanessa, ever the manipulator, tried a different approach. Think about what's best for all of us, Jenna. We can still be a family. Isn't that worth more than revenge? But their words fell on deaf ears. I had seen their true colors, and there was no going back. This is no longer about money or reputation, I said, my resolve unwavering. It's about justice. You will both pay for what you've done. The court has ruled in my favor, and you will comply with its decision. The look of defeat on their faces was the vindication I had sought for so long. I stood up, ready to leave the past behind. This is where our paths diverge, Ethan and Vanessa. I hope the lessons you learn from this are profound and lasting. Goodbye. As I walked away, I didn't look back. I had turned the tables on them, reclaimed my dignity and independence. The future was uncertain, but it was mine to shape. Ethan and Vanessa were now just a part of my past, a painful chapter that had come to a close. In the aftermath of my final encounter with Ethan and Vanessa, I found myself standing at a crossroads. The chapter of my life dominated by their deceit and manipulation was closed, but the journey ahead was mine to chart. The taste of victory was sweet, yet it bore the complexity of hard-earned lessons. I had moved into a new apartment, a space that was entirely my own. The walls were yet to be decorated. The rooms still echoed with the newness, but it was a sanctuary of peace and freedom. For the first time in years, I felt in control of my destiny. Word of Ethan and Vanessa's downfall spread quickly. Their once prestigious social circle had crumbled, leaving them isolated and disgraced. The lavish lifestyle they had so greedily pursued was now a distant memory, replaced by the harsh reality of their actions. But the true reward of my journey was not in their downfall. It was in the reclaiming of my identity and the rebuilding of my life. My career, which had once been a point of contention in our marriage, flourished. I was promoted, recognized for my resilience and dedication. Colleagues who had heard of my ordeal expressed admiration and support, further fueling my drive to succeed. I often found myself reflecting on the journey. The pain and betrayal had been real, but so was the strength I discovered within myself. I had faced my fears, stood up against injustice, and emerged victorious. The final twist of fate came unexpectedly one day. As I sipped coffee in a cafe, the same one where I had last seen Ethan and Vanessa, I overheard a conversation at the next table. It was about them. They were struggling, facing legal battles and financial ruin. Vanessa, once so proud and haughty, was now a shadow of her former self, humbled by the consequences of her greed and manipulation. As I listened, I felt no joy in their suffering. Instead, I felt a sense of closure. My revenge had been served, justice had been meted out, but I no longer dwelled in the past. They were a chapter closed, a lesson learned. I finished my coffee and stepped out into the sunlight, feeling its warmth on my face. The world around me seemed brighter, filled with possibilities. I had survived the storm and was now basking in the calm that followed. As I walked down the street, I realized that my story was not defined by Ethan and Vanessa, nor by the pain they had caused. My story was about resilience, about rising from the ashes and forging a path of my own. I smiled, embracing the future with open arms. The road ahead was mine to travel, filled with hope, opportunities, and the promise of new beginnings. Your time here is over. Marla's words sliced through me like shards of glass. Her steely gaze met mine, cold and unflinching. In her outstretched hand were 2 crumpled eviction notices. My tongue froze in my mouth as my daughter Ellie clutched my leg. I stammered, "What are you talking about? Get out, both of you." Marla flung the papers at me. "You have 2 weeks. This is our home," I shrieked. "You can't do this." Marla and I had never gotten along, but I endured her subtle digs and lacked warmth for my husband's sake. Dane could never see the manipulation behind her passive aggression. Our fairy tale romance bloomed quickly. Within a year, I was walking down the aisle, trusting Dane to provide the stable life I longed for. But my Prince Charming had one flaw: his overbearing mother. We compromised by living in Marla's sprawling guest house so she could help with Ellie. When Dane left for an overseas work assignment, the dynamic shifted. Marla's true colors emerged. Her demands became orders, her criticisms vicious attacks. I lost my autonomy, my place of belonging. I was a visitor in my own home. Marla smirked. "Oh, but I can, and I will. This is my house, my land. You are nothing but an unwanted guest." "How could you?" My voice cracked, years of unspoken hurts rising. "I have given up everything for this family." Marla stepped closer, her breath hot on my face. "Yet you have taken everything from my son," I staggered back. That's not true." "It is. You seduced him away from me, turned him against his own mother. You and your spawn don't belong here." Ellie began to cry, clutching my leg tighter. Rage and helplessness collided within me. "We're staying," I said firmly. "Dane would never allow this. He loves us." Something sinister flashed in Marla's eyes. "We'll see about that." She stormed upstairs, her footsteps booming overhead. I sank to the floor, Ellie curling into my lap. My mind raced over Marla's sudden cruelty. Had I missed signs over the years? Were there clues that she loathed my very existence? I thought of the snide comments, manipulative guilt trips, and undermining of my parenting. Yes, the clues were there all along. I just didn't let myself see them, blinded by hope and trust. The next morning, I awoke determined to stop Marla's scheme. With Dane overseas for 6 more months, I had to protect this household myself. As Ellie slept, I walked to the main house under the gray dawn light. I typed in the key code with trembling fingers. A red light flashed. Access denied. She changed the locks. I rushed to the garage side door. Locked. The back door, too. She had locked me out overnight, like a stray dog. Panicked, I ran to the front gate and dialed Dane's number. All I got was an automated message saying he was unavailable. Again and again I called. Nothing. The truth seeped in like ice through my veins. Marla had planned this meticulously. She had severed my connections, ensuring her actions went undeterred. I was utterly alone, my cries falling upon deaf ears. As lightning ripped through the bruised black clouds above, the first fat raindrops began to fall. I ran back to the guest house, my thin nightgown soaked and clinging. Ellie was awake now, her frightened eyes searching mine for answers. In them I saw my own helplessness reflected. At that moment, staring into my innocent daughter's eyes, a steely determination stirred within me. I would not let us end up on the streets. Surely there had to be help, someone who could overturn Marla's vicious scheming. I would fight tooth and nail to shield Ellie from harm. As thunder cracked ominously outside, I hugged Ellie tight. No matter what it took, I silently vowed justice would be served. The storm raged all night, sealing Ellie and I inside the guest house. When dawn broke, the locks remained unchanged. Marla had made her stance clear. We were trespassers now. My phone buzzed with a text from her. "Come collect your things. You have 1 hour." Lugging suitcases, Ellie and I hurried through the downpour. Marla stood at the open front door, watching us with narrowed eyes. "My jewelry box?" I asked as she shadowed me from room to room. "Dane's laptop? Not yours to take," she said. I spun around. "You can't just steal our stuff. And you can't just steal my son," she shrieked. "Get what's coming to you and get out." I wanted to slap her. But Ellie's frightened eyes stopped me. We worked in tense silence, Marla's presence suffocating. When I reached for a family photo, Marla snatched it away. "You lost the right to display this when you stole my son from me," she sneered. "I didn't steal Dane," I cried. "We fell in love." "Ha!" She glared at Ellie, cowering behind me. "You schemed to get pregnant and trap him. Admit it." "How dare you?" I spat back. "You are monstrous." Marla stepped closer, eyes ablaze. "Get out before I throw you out myself." My hands trembled, yearning to claw at her. Instead, I grabbed Ellie and the last bags. Marla followed us to the doorway. "If I catch you here again, I'm calling the police," she said. "You disgust me." She slammed the door with finality. The echo reverberated through my bones. "What do we do now, Mommy?" Ellie whimpered. "We'll figure it out, sweetie." I stroked her wet hair, my resolve hardening. There had to be help somewhere. We trudged down the long driveway. The gate clanged shut behind us with deafening finality. I didn't realize where we were heading until we stood at the bus stop. It offered little shelter from the biting rain. An elderly woman peered at us from under her umbrella. "Are you all right, dear?" I wanted to cry and scream. Instead, I said calmly, "We are fine, thank you." I didn't want to burden strangers with my troubles. Surely I could handle this. The bus wheezed to a stop. As we climbed aboard, the driver called, "Hey, no dripping wet people on my bus." I froze. "Please, we have nowhere else." "Rules are rules, lady. Now get off." The doors slammed shut. Ellie whimpered again. My stoic facade cracked. We were drenched and homeless now, all because of Marla's cruelty. We walked for ages, it seemed, my feet blistered in my soggy heels. Ellie's steps slowed. Finally I carried her, my arms burning. The rain softened to a drizzle as we reached the city center. My socks grated with grit. Exhaustion and hunger clawed at me. But I soldiered on, avoiding the judgmental gazes of passerbys. Finally, I sank onto a bus stop bench, Ellie curling up beside me. Shivering and defeated, stranded in this strange, heartless place. Suddenly the bench shook as someone settled heavily next to us. A large, bearded man reeking of booze. I shifted away, shielding Ellie protectively. He leered at me. "Rough night, sweetheart? I can make you feel real nice." He made crude gestures. Revulsion and rage surged within me. In that moment, I hated Marla with every fiber of my being. She had reduced us to this, vulnerable, endangered, adrift. Her vengeance wouldn't just upend my world, but could destroy Ellie's innocence. As the man leaned closer, I hugged my daughter tight. With icy clarity, I knew, if it came down to it, I would kill Marla with my bare hands to protect this precious child. I grabbed Ellie's hand and fled from the leering drunk, his taunts ringing in my ears. My legs shook and tears blurred my vision, but I kept running till the bus stop was out of sight. Gasping for air, I sank onto a bench outside a cafe. Ellie climbed into my lap, her small body quaking with sobs that racked my heart. Why are people being so mean, Mommy? I stroked her hair, a lump rising in my throat. I don't know, sweetie, but we'll be okay. She gazed up at me with Dane's trusting eyes. In them I saw my fraying composure reflected back. I couldn't fall apart now, no matter how heavy the storm raging within me. Just then a waitress stepped outside, eyeing us warily. Hey, no loitering here. Humiliation flooded me as wandering eyes paused to stare. Gripping Ellie's hand, we hurried on once more. As we walked, I overheard snippets of conversation at the bus stops and cafes we passed. Complaining about the rain, excited weekend plans, normal people leading normal lives. While Ellie and I wandered like pariahs, burdened by Marla's cruelty, no one spared us a second glance. By evening, blisters oozed in my shoes. My drenched cardigan provided little warmth as the rain picked up again. We took shelter in a metro station, huddling together on plastic seats. Commuters bustled past with annoyance or indifference. We were out of place in their orderly worlds. As we sat shivering, a gang of teenagers sauntered up. Their bold gaze raked over me. One of them licked his lips, calling to his friends. Little fishies seem lost from the school. Maybe we help return them home? They laughed at some vile secret joke. My skin crawled, but I met his eyes unflinchingly. We don't want any trouble, thanks. Please just leave us alone. Their grinning leader leaned in, his hot breath assaulting me. Oh, but we can show you ladies some fun. Just then a security guard noticed the commotion. The youth scattered into the crowds. As we rode the late metro home, Ellie asked in a small voice, Mommy, why are people being so scary? Do we seem bad? My heart shattered. My brave girl didn't deserve this. She needed nurture, not exposure to the dark underbelly of dispassionate society. This was all Marla's doing. As we walked the empty streets to the nearby shelter, bleak hopelessness washed over me. We were adrift with doors slammed in our faces every turn. Easy prey for urban ghouls. Out here we had no rights, no allies. The shelter staff were kind at least. They brought soup and blankets and let Ellie pick a battered toy from a donation box. But we slept fitfully on hard cots cramped beside other homeless people. The air hung heavy with sour smells of confined bodies, cigarettes and unwashed clothes. Every noise jolted me awake, clutching Ellie close in the dingy dimness. By morning my resolve solidified into cold fury. When normal society discards you without care, you must take justice into your own hands. Laws did not apply to us vagrants, so why should I play by rules that kept failing me and my daughter? As we gathered our meager belongings the next morning, a young woman hurried over. Excuse me, are you Serafina? Someone left an odd message for you. She handed me a scribbled note that simply read, I can help you. Meet at the Lion Plaza fountain at noon. My eyes narrowed. Was this some trick of Marla's, a trap to lure us and lock us away for good? Perhaps she had hired local thugs to solve her problem permanently. I crumpled the note, ready to toss it out. Then I paused, smoothing it on my knee instead. Whoever had written this seemed to know we needed help desperately. What did we have left to lose in hearing them out? I had to take the risk, for both Ellie's sake and for mine, because the fury simmering within yearned to burst forth, needing only a conduit. If this mysterious meeting granted me that chance, then so be it. Resolve hardened into reckless abandon, and just maybe a hint of hope flickered within. We would go to this Lion Plaza rendezvous, our future balanced on whatever awaited there, be it trap or lifeline. Lion Plaza loomed before us, a lion's statue guarding its glossy facade. Ellie squeezed my hand as we navigated smartly dressed professionals striding by with purpose. We stood out in our rumpled clothes, receiving sideways glances and wide berths. At the burbling fountain stood a woman scanning the crowds intently. As we approached, she broke into a smile. Serafina? I'm so glad you came. I'm Nina. Her warm demeanor surprised me. I tensed, ready to grab Ellie and flee. Did Marla send you? Is this some kind of trap? Nina blinked. You mean Mrs. Marlowe? Oh gosh, no, but it sounds like she has put you through the ringer. Her brows furrowed with concern. Warily I asked, Then who are you and what do you want? Nina gestured to a nearby cafe. Once seated with cups of hot chocolate, she began. I'm a social justice lawyer. I got your case file recently. She showed me a brown folder bearing our family name. I handle housing disputes and wrongful evictions. So you can help us get our home back from Marla? Hope and suspicion vied within me. I'm certainly going to try. What she has done is illegal on so many grounds. As Dane's wife, you have as much right to that home as she does. I just need some details to build a solid case. Over the next hour, the full story poured out of me. Years of subtle abuse, feeling unwelcome in my own house, Ellie and I cast out and cut off like criminals. Nina's outrage grew. This is absolutely reprehensible. Don't you worry, I will fight tooth and nail for you. That terrible woman needs a wake-up call. Please let me help you seek justice. Her vehement support felt alien after days of indifference from society. I found myself nodding and placing tentative trust in this fiery stranger. So what now? I asked. Do we have a decent shot against Marla's lawyers? More than decent, Nina declared. I did some digging on Mrs. Marlowe. Did you know she faces federal charges of tax fraud and misuse of pension funds? I gaped as she showed me printed articles detailing Marla's alleged shady financial activities. This gives us serious leverage, Nina continued. I say we force mediation to regain access to your home ASAP, then pursue full financial restitution for these past weeks. Marla owes you big time. My mind reeled, hope and hunger for vengeance tangling within. Nina gripped my hand. I won't rest until justice is served. That I promise you. Marla picked the wrong girl to mess with this time. Her steely smile mirrored the cold determination crystallizing within me. The lesson was clear. In the face of adversity, the meek acquiesce while the fierce rise up. Gathering my courage and outrage, I would channel them with precision to cut Marla down to size. The days that followed passed in a blur. Nina filed injunctions while I gave statements to investigators regarding Marla's financial fraud. Serving her eviction notices felt deliciously poetic. For the first time I held power while she scrambled for footing. Soon we had a court date where Marla would have to publicly account for wrongful eviction, abuse, and misuse of my husband's assets. The night before I lay awake, playing out confrontation scenarios. Marla's demise became an obsession, lighting my days with purpose. Nina suggested forgiveness may bring me peace. I disagreed. Only seeing Marla stripped of her pride, wealth, and status would satisfy me now. She had awoken a vindictive fury that would only be quelled by her absolute ruin. My dreams held no mercy either, featuring Marla begging on bare knees for pardon I would not grant. I wanted it in writing that she renounced all rights to our family. I longed to grind her face into the dirt, emotionally, financially, existentially. She had to fully grasp my suffering. In the golden courtroom light next morning, I cradled Ellie close. My fury awaited its reckoning with bated breath. One way or another, Marla would pay the toll for her cruelty today. Of that I was wholly certain, without shred of doubt or hesitation. Justice would be done, by law or by my own hands if needed. The click of Marla's heels echoed like gunshots through the hushed courtroom. I steadied my nerves as she approached the stand, halting mere feet from me. Her icy glare bore through my skull. The hearing progressed efficiently thanks to Nina's thorough documentation of Marla's misdeeds. As the judge reviewed signed testimonies, Nina leaned over. The law is on our side, but she's refusing to settle. Get ready, she wants blood. When Marla took the stand, her voice filled the room. These allegations are preposterous. I devoted my life to my son. Then this woman seduced him away with an intentional pregnancy. She jabbed a finger viciously in my direction. They sponged off my home for years before turning my own son against me. The room erupted into objections as she continued spewing venom about my treachery and deceit. The judge pounded his gavel impatiently while my nails carved crescents in my skin. Enough! The judge ordered Marla to restrict her statements to facts. I wanted to leap over the benches and gag her myself. When her diatribe ended, Nina rose swiftly. Do you deny committing financial fraud repeatedly for decades, including this past month? Certainly not. Marla's glare darkened. Unethical accountants made clerical errors I intend to rectify. Interesting. Nina raised documents detailing Marla's credit card debts and bad loans. So forging your son's signature to make stock market payments cleared in his name this year alone was just a clerical error? The courtroom stirred. Marla visibly blanched but quickly regained composure. As I said, errors occurred due to accountants I clearly cannot trust anymore. Well, as per signed legal affidavits. Nina proceeded to outline witnesses testifying to Marla's emotional abuse and controlling behavior towards me. Dane's secretary confirmed intercepting my calls for help on Marla's instructions. With each damning revelation, I relished watching Marla's facade crumble. Her fingers worried the pearls at her throat continuously. Under the weight of facts, her web of lies collapsed, strand by strand. Finally, Nina concluded by attesting the eviction itself was unlawful on multiple grounds. As closing statements ended, palpable tension choked the room. When the gravel struck, my heart leapt. Given factual evidence, the court rules in favor of the plaintiff, upholding her legal rights to the household and associated assets. A crashing noise made heads swivel towards Marla. Pearls scattered across the floor where she had ripped her necklace off in fury. 2 armed guards flanked her as she trembled in outrage. When Nina squeezed my hand, the knot in my chest finally loosened. I wanted to melt in sheer relief. Instead, I said clearly, "Thank you, Your Honor, for delivering justice today." Marla spat venom at me till the guards escorted her out. The room cleared swiftly, people shaking my hand and commending my courage. In glorious vindication, I signed the court orders granting me power over the house, assets, and staff. "We did it," Nina cried, hugging me gleefully. I let out a long breath, feeling drained and almost disappointed. Somehow Marla's slow unraveling hadn't satisfied me enough. I craved to personally snap her composure, not just legally defeat her. As if reading my mind, Nina said gently, "I know you hoped for an emotional apology too, but the law delivered justice regardless. Focus on moving forward now, away from toxicity and toward stability and peace." I nodded, knowing she spoke wisdom. But my heart still snarled for retaliation, not yet sated. I yearned to wring Marla dry myself. As we stepped out into the warm sunset, I checked my phone out of habit. A text from Dane glowed on the screen, my heart stopping. "Boarding flight home. Can't wait to see your faces when I surprise you tomorrow." I read Dane's text again, my stomach churning. How would I explain these harrowing months to him? Worse still, how would Marla twist events to vilify me instead? She would undoubtedly ambush him first. As Nina drove us to a hotel for the night, I agonized over what awaited at home. I had to intercept Dane before Marla's selective version poisoned his mind. At dawn, I was a bundle of nerves pacing the modest room. Today would test the limits of Dane's devotion. Surely our marriage could withstand his mother's schemes? Surely he knew my spirit, my steadfast commitment transcending the ugliness birthed of late. My phone flashed with a text summoning us home urgently to discuss recent concerning incidents. My heart sank, suspicions confirmed. Marla had already sunk her claws into my unwitting husband. The drive home stretched endlessly. I rehearsed defenses against imagined attacks. Ellie dozed, blissfully unaware of the viper's nest awaiting us. At long last, the imposing iron gates of Marla's manor swung open. Memories, tender, tempestuous, and traumatic, flooded my senses. In the foyer stood Dane, travel-worn but whole. Our eyes met, and in his deep brown gaze swirled bewilderment, hurt. And was that wary suspicion? Before I could move, he stepped forward, enfolding me in a hug that felt perfunctory. I heard Marla's shrill voice from the sitting room spewing her fictionalized version, no doubt. Dane released me, holding me at arm's length. "What happened here?" Mother said, "Well, she said." Confusion creased his handsome face, once untroubled by doubts. I opened my mouth, but Marla swept into view, an imposing specter in black silks. "Dane, thank goodness you've come." She clung to his arm possessively. "This woman has lost her wits, I fear. She served me outrageous legal notices while you were away, even called the police with wild accusations." "That's not true," I cried. "She abused and evicted Ellie and I illegally. I have court orders." "Lies." Marla's eyes blazed. "She tried ransacking our family assets, turned sentimental staff against me, who I treated like my own." Dane looked utterly bewildered, gaze ping-ponging between us. As the shrill accusations overlapped, he held up a hand forcefully. "Enough. Clearly there is more here than I grasp. Mother, let Serafina speak without interruptions. I think mediation tomorrow will do us good." I exhaled in relief. Dane's integrity shone through despite the mudslinging. However, his ensuing aloofness stung that night. We slept in separate guest rooms at his insistence to remain impartial for now. It churned my gut imagining Marla's poison seeping into intimate crevices of our marriage. The next evening, Dane gathered us in the rosewood-paneled study. Marla sat stone-faced, over-roused, and under-eye bagged, her gaze promising revenge. I stated our case calmly, then presented documents corroborating events, police reports, witness testimonies including those of former staff Marla had fired. With each betrayal revealed, her expression curdled further. Why did the court rule fully in Serafina's favor if these accusations held no merit, Mother? Dane asked finally. Marla stammered vainly, but vicious insults dried up under his probing stare. I concluded gently with empathy for family bonds fracturing under duress. Appeals for reconciliation hung in the air but were met only by Marla's scoffing dismissal. Dane passed a weary hand over his eyes. I see enough evidence to understand gross injustice occurred in my absence. He took my hand then, a healing salve to my battered spirit. Marla rose, livid. You would pick that woman over your own mother. She has bewitched your mind. Dane regarded her evenly. There is no question of picking teams here. I am simply acting based on facts and principles we all should uphold. His unflinching morality tempered the lingering ache for outright revenge in my heart. Instead, grace took seed there. Our new life bloomed beautifully free of Marla's shadow. Her appeals against the court orders failed repeatedly. With money recovered from her years of financial deceit, I nurtured dreams forlorn in stale air. Ellie thrived with Dane's loving mentorship. 6 peaceful months passed before Detective Morris rang one morning. Marla had overdosed last evening on prescription pills mixed with vodka. Her parting note left no doubt she intended the timing to devastate Dane. One final vengeful scheme from the grave. Dane wept over her portrait. I shed no tears, feeling only the relief of knowing her lifelong efforts to destroy our happiness had ultimately destroyed her instead. I dropped the phone, shock reverberating through me. Marla was dead, by choice. The room tilted as I sank into a chair, hugging myself against an odd chill. Somehow it felt anticlimactic for her toxic presence to simply wink out overnight. After decades devoted to criticizing my every breath, she robbed me even of closure by exiting on her own terms. She remained an infuriating enigma I had futilely battled. In losing, perhaps her solitary victory was retaining that mask of mystery veiling innate darkness. Dane returned home shaken that evening. Police had discovered litters of alcohol stashed under Marla's bed, despite her abstinence pledges to us over the years. Her unsent letters unleashed vitriol, blaming me entirely for her miserable isolation. Even beyond the grave, she spewed blame on her chosen scapegoat. I should have felt fury or frustration. Instead, profound sadness for squandered generosity washed over me. Despite Marla's efforts to eclipse my spirit, she had only eclipsed her own. Weeks passed in a daze helping Dane handle her estate. I had worried her death may drive an irreparable wedge of grief between us, but it brought epiphanies that tightened our bond instead. Dane examined bank activity, exposing Marla had embezzled vast sums from family ventures for years. She had deceived him down to exact dollar amounts on trust fund statements. Her betrayal ran bone deep, though he had forgiven and indulged her lifetime. I knew that pain intimately myself, of realizing your place and worth in a loved one's life was but mirage and illusion. No matter how selflessly or wholeheartedly you gave, it faded to nothing through twisted lenses of selfishness. Maybe that's why Dane and I grew closer after her passing. We finally recognized each other as kindred spirits equally scarred. Our solace emerged in long overdue honesty. With Marla's death, the burden of unrealized expectations lifted too. I observed changes in Dane. Steadfast gentleness gave way to playfulness and open affection. Freed from her critical presence, our marriage deepened roots resilient to the storms weathered. Soon lighter news turned attention to the future. Our family would grow with a new baby come winter. Dane was elated, immediately discussing plans for the nursery and making educational investment portfolios. When we told Ellie she would be a big sister, her joy lit up the room. The baby can have all my old toys. I'll help take care of it too. We'll be gentle, I promise. Her innocent excitement sparked an idea that Dane and I mulled for months. Ultimately, we signed custody papers granting us legal guardianship of Marla's youngest niece, Alexandra. Raising a 3-year-old and newborn simultaneously was daunting, but we were determined to carry on Marla's legacy with the right foundations. Maybe symbolic redemption also wove through our intentions. Alexandra was a sunny child despite her own turbulent past. As I braided her hair each morning, my heart swelled with fierce protectiveness for her future. Late each night, Dane and I would tuck both our slumbering girls into bed with whispered affection. Then we would linger over photos of Marla through the decades, beautiful bride glowing under her veil, doting young mom cuddling her only son. I recognized myself mirrored across time in her lingering gaze at newborn Dane. That primal urge to nurture life's most precious gift transcended even our bloodied history. Perhaps inner humanity bound us all still, however hidden beneath churning tides of bitterness or blame. If one bothered piercing the surface far enough, flickers might emerge from even the murkiest depths. Glimpses swam through my mind then, Marla adjusting my gown's necklace moments before I married her son, her uneven attempts at baking Ellie's birthday cake yearly, brief interludes of almost connection, but they lasted mere moments before malice yanked Marla under again. And so our turbulent dance endured years, never fully losing rhythm, until the still silence of loss, muted music, twisted by ire. In peaceful twilight glow now I contemplated her portrait displayed in honor. Lingering shadows yet marred her likeness for me. With sighing acceptance, finally I let dulled burdens slip their stubborn hooks from my soul. Tomorrow's dawn felt a shade brighter already. I awoke before dawn, pulled from sleep by an unfamiliar pang. Today was the anniversary of Marla's death. 1 year since her last malevolent strike carved grief between Dane and I. Yet looking back, times darkened had ushered in relating with newfound richness. Loss had laid foundations for growth beyond imagined. I tiptoed downstairs where Dane stood gazing out the window, coffee mug untouched on the table beside him. Wordlessly, I slipped my hand in his, sunlight slowly illuminating our reflection in the glass. "I was dreaming about her last trips to the galleries with me," Dane said softly. "She taught me to cultivate an eye for brushstroke textures. We would debate interpretations for hours." I listened silently, no longer bristling when Marla inhabited his musings. The past year had taught me compassion for pains born of love's complexity. Dane turned suddenly, urgency in his voice. "I apologize for being unavailable when you both needed me most. It gutted me realizing how she failed you so selfishly." I squeezed his hand, our solace flowing freely sans pride's restraints. "You kept faith despite every odd. What we endured revealed who truly had eyes to see our essence." Dane revealed he had permanently closed Marla's embezzling accounts, redirecting funds to trust funds for Alexandra and our sons. "I should have managed her crooked finances more astutely myself," he admitted. "Now the future will know rectitude." As we spoke, a fresh vista emerged, one with crystal air granting clear sight to veil-piercing eyes. A transformed topography of vulnerability bridging distances isolating. The day passed peacefully, the house filled with Alexandra's giggles as Ellie inducted her new doll. By evening, solemnity veiled Dane's eyes again at Marla's favorite restaurant. Had resentment marred our remembrance despite resolve otherwise? Upon returning, lively chaos greeted us instead. The kids had strewn living room cushions, creating a play fortress. Their ecstatic creativity eddied around Dane and I as we sank down smiling. Weight of unspoken hurts seemed to lift from our shoulders. As I rested my head on his shoulder, Dane said gently, "This spaciousness was unavailable while Mother dominated our psyche and home, but Alexandra embodies openings still possible. Truly, shadows could not fully overwhelm light bold enough. Through youthful resilience, goodness had carved inroads revealing glinting hopes. Over a blaze fireplace, I read a framed Rilke verse newly mounted. Let everything happen to you, beauty and terror, just keep going. No feeling is final." Those timeless lines now evoked Marla rather profoundly. Our interwoven lives testified to the deceased never fully absenting from the living they marked. Through memory's continuous stream, echoes rippled beyond departures defying finality. Emotions distilled over fraught decades swirled continuously between us all still, longing for reconciliation. So I breathed deeply, inviting understanding to settle any lasting resentment. The past's grip had loosened sufficiently by now, surely. I stared at dancing flames like a seer seeking revelation in glowing embers. An urge emerged to voice words never uttered to Marla herself in life. So I whispered into vast eternity beyond, "May you discover the abounding love eluding your reach here, where souls reconvene unfettered." Something like consecration flowed through the quiet room just then. Dane held me closer, this newfound bond a sanctuary mooring us against fitful spirits still roaming the psyche's foggy terrain. Soon children's bedtime rituals claimed our attention fully. We immersed in goodnight songs and silly rhymes, shielding their dreaming from this date's morning. As both girls drifted asleep, Dane asked, "Do you think she found any sort of peace?" I recognized the search for validation in his eyes, that inner light had breached Marla's darkness somewhere. I touched his cheek, more tenderness than certainty rooting me. That is beyond our judgment now. We walk this terrain relying on our own light instead. Outside, the inky night sky glimmered with stars defying comprehension, yet radiant still. No matter how dense the darkness, luminosity endures, beckoning vision higher. On this truth we could stand firm. Walking into my house, the atmosphere felt unsettlingly silent, a stark contrast to the vibrant surprise I had imagined all day. "I'm home," I announced, my voice echoing through the empty space, expecting to see my husband Nate's smiling face or hear our daughter's giggles. Instead, a pair of unfamiliar high heels caught my attention, an intrusion in our cozy nest. Curiosity morphed into confusion as I followed the trail leading to the living room. There, framed by the soft glow of the afternoon sun, stood Nate, his arm casually draped over the shoulders of a woman I had never seen before. Her beauty was undeniable, but it was the intimacy of their posture that stung. "Happy birthday, Eliza," Nate greeted, his grin wide and unsettling. "Who's this?" My voice was steady, despite the whirlwind of emotions inside me. "Our guest for today," Nate replied nonchalantly. "Meet Alex Carter, my lover." The room spun as his words sunk in. "Lover?" I echoed, disbelief clouding my judgment. "Yes, and since it's your birthday, I thought it's the perfect time to give you your present." Nate's tone was eerily calm as he handed me an envelope. Inside, the words "divorce agreement" screamed back at me, a cruel joke masquerading as a gift. This is a joke, right?" The words barely escaped my lips, each syllable a struggle. "No joke, Eliza. I want a divorce. I'm in love with Alex," Nate declared, as if discussing the weather, not dismantling our life together. The coldness in his eyes, the ease with which he shattered our vows, was more painful than the betrayal itself. "You want to throw away our life for a fling? Alex is not a fling. This is real. And you're just not enough anymore." His words were a knife, each syllable twisting deeper. The woman, Alex, remained silent, a spectator to the wreckage of my marriage. "Enough, Nate. If you want this divorce, you'll regret it. But you'll get what you wish for," I said, my voice laced with a calmness I didn't feel. Nate's smirk faded, replaced by a flicker of uncertainty. "You think you can make me regret this? Watch me." My reply was a whisper, a promise of the storm to come. As I turned to leave, the gravity of the situation weighed heavily on me. My marriage, the love I thought we shared, was over. But in its ashes, a resolve was born. Nate would regret this betrayal, not today, but soon, and I would make sure of it. The silence of my bedroom offered no comfort as I lay awake, the scene from earlier replaying in my mind. The audacity of Nate's betrayal, his cruel unveiling of his affair on my birthday, was a wound that festered with each passing second. But it was his next actions that solidified my resolve for revenge. The morning after the revelation, Nate had the nerve to sit at the breakfast table as if nothing had happened. He poured himself coffee, the normalcy of the act a slap in my face. Alex was nowhere to be seen, but her presence lingered like a bad smell. "Nate," I started, my voice steady despite the turmoil inside. "You really think you can just replace me with her? And on my birthday?" He shrugged, a gesture so filled with indifference it fueled my anger. Timing was coincidental. "But yes, I think Alex and I will be very happy." "Happy?" I scoffed. "You destroy our family for a fling, and you think you'll be happy?" "Alex is not a fling," Nate snapped, his facade slipping for the first time. "She understands me, unlike you." "Understands you? Or flatters your ego?" I retorted, unable to keep the bitterness from my voice. Nate's eyes narrowed. "What would you know about understanding? You're just convenient." The word struck me, a verbal blow that was meant to hurt. "Convenient?" I repeated, the absurdity of the situation suddenly clear. "Well, let's see how convenient life is without me handling everything for you." Nate's confidence wavered, a hint of realization dawning. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying, enjoy your happiness with Alex. But remember, actions have consequences. You'll see." I left the table, leaving Nate to ponder my words. The next steps were clear in my mind. Nate had chosen his path, blinded by infatuation and arrogance. He had underestimated me, thinking I would crumble under his betrayal. He was wrong. As I started planning, the idea of revenge wasn't just a fleeting thought. It was a promise. Nate would realize the gravity of his mistake, not just in losing me, but in underestimating my resolve. The betrayal had shattered something within me. But from those pieces, a new, determined Eliza was emerging, one that Nate would soon learn to fear. A month had swiftly passed since Nate's unfathomable betrayal, and the wounds he inflicted remained raw. Yet amidst the turmoil, a plan had taken root, one that promised not just revenge, but a revelation of Nate's folly. The day I decided to confront Nate and Alex was ordinary, with the sun casting a warm glow over what was to be the stage of Nate's unraveling. I found them together in the living room, their laughter a jarring melody in what used to be a home filled with genuine joy. Enjoying ourselves, are we? My voice cut through their merriment, causing Nate to stiffen and Alex to silence. Nate, we need to talk. About the divorce. And about Alex, I said, my tone leaving no room for the usual deflections. Nate eyed me warily, sensing the shift in my demeanor. What about it? It's about her famous writer status. You see, working in publishing, I have a good memory for authors. And Alex, I turned my gaze to the person who had invaded my life. I can't seem to recall any of your work. Alex's confidence seemed to waver under my scrutiny, a crack in the facade they had so carefully maintained. Nate, however, laughed off my accusation. You think you know every writer out there? I know enough to recognize a lie when I see one, I retorted sharply. Nate's amusement faded, replaced by a flicker of concern. What are you getting at, Eliza? Simply put, I doubt Alex is who you think she is, and I intend to find out the truth. The threat hung heavy in the air, a challenge to the web of deceit they had woven. Nate's reaction was immediate and defensive, a sign I had struck a nerve. You're just jealous, Eliza. You can't stand the thought of me being happy with someone else. Jealous? The accusation was laughable, and I let my disbelief show. No, Nate, I'm curious, and I'm going to do a little digging. Let's see what truths come to light. I left them with those parting words, a promise of the storm to come. The confrontation was not just about exposing lies. It was about reclaiming my power, about showing Nate that his betrayal would not leave me broken, but stronger, more determined. As I began my investigation into Alex's supposed literary fame, the pieces started falling into place. Each discovery, each lie uncovered, was a step closer to my revenge. Nate had chosen his path, blinded by lust and deception. He had failed to see the strength in me, mistaking my love for weakness. But as the truth about Alex began to unravel, so too would Nate's illusions. The confrontation was just the beginning. The real drama was yet to unfold, and I would ensure Nate watched as his world crumbled around him, piece by piece. My investigation into Alex Carter's background revealed a web of lies so intricate it was almost impressive. Armed with undeniable proof, I confronted Nate and Alex, determined to expose the deceit that had upended my life. I found them in what used to be our shared home office, now a testament to Nate's betrayal. Without preamble, I laid out the evidence I had gathered. Alex Carter, or should I say Alex Connors, not a writer, but quite the actor. Nate's face paled, a stark contrast to Alex's growing unease. What are you talking about, Eliza? Did you really think you could fool me? Your famous writer is nothing more than a fabricator of lies. There's no record of any Alex Carter publishing anything. But Alex Connors, on the other hand, has quite a history of deception. But Alex attempted to interject, but I wasn't finished. Save it. I'm not interested in anything you have to say. Turning to Nate, I continued, You brought this person into our lives, into our daughter's life, based on what, a fantasy? Nate stumbled over his words, the reality of the situation finally dawning on him. I didn't know. Of course you didn't. You were too blinded by whatever it is you thought you found in Alex. But the truth, it's far from the illusion you've been living. The confrontation was not just about exposing Alex. It was a reckoning for Nate. The man who had promised to love and cherish me, forsaking all others, had instead chosen a path of betrayal and lies. I want you out, I said, my voice devoid of the love and warmth it once held for Nate. Out of this house and out of our lives. You've made your choice, and now you'll live with the consequences. Nate tried to argue, to plead for understanding, but there was nothing left to discuss. You made your bed, Nate. Now you get to lie in it. Alone. As Nate and Alex gathered their things, the finality of the moment settled over me. This was not the life I had envisioned, but it was the one I was left with. Yet, in the midst of the chaos and heartbreak, a sense of empowerment began to take root. Nate's descent was of his own making, a direct result of his actions and choices. Watching them leave, I knew this was only the beginning. Nate's betrayal had unleashed a storm within me, one that would not be satisfied until justice was served. My revenge had only just begun, and Nate would soon realize the true cost of his actions. In the aftermath of Nate's revelation, I had expected him to retreat, to lick his wounds in private. Instead, he showed up at my doorstep, looking more haggard than I had ever seen him. The desperation in his eyes was palpable as he stood there, waiting for me to speak first. "What do you want, Nate?" My voice was cold, unwelcoming. I need to talk to you. About Alex and everything. He stumbled over his words, a man defeated. I considered turning him away, letting him drown in the mess he had made. But curiosity, and admittedly a desire to witness his suffering up close, compelled me to let him in. We sat across from each other, the air thick with tension. Nate was the first to break the silence, his voice barely above a whisper. "Alex, he wasn't who I thought he was. I was fooled, Eliza." "Fooled? Or too blinded by your own betrayal to see the truth?" I couldn't help the bitterness that seeped into my words. It was all a lie, his identity, his story. I don't even know who he is anymore. "And you think this confession changes anything between us?" Nate looked down, shame etched into every line of his face. "I know I've made unforgivable mistakes, but Eliza, you have to believe me. I was deceived." The conversation was a farce, a pathetic attempt by Nate to garner sympathy where none was due. But as much as I despised him for what he had done, I couldn't ignore the implications of his deceit. "So, what do you plan to do now? Crawl back to the life you so carelessly threw away?" Nate's eyes met mine, a flicker of hope in their depths. I was hoping we could start over, maybe not as a couple, but as friends?" The suggestion was laughable. Friends after everything he had done? "Nate, you destroyed our family. You chose Alex over your own wife and daughter, and now you come here seeking friendship?" I know it's a lot to ask, but I don't know where else to turn." The pathetic sight of him, a man broken by his own choices, stirred something in me. Not pity, but a resolve to see this revenge through to the end. "Nate, you need to leave. There's nothing for you here. Not anymore." He nodded, a man resigned to his fate, and stood to leave. But before he could reach the door, I stopped him with a final thought. "Let this be a lesson, Nate. You can't play with people's lives and expect to walk away unscathed. Karma always finds a way." With that, Nate walked out of my life, leaving behind a trail of destruction and a path to a new beginning for me. His exposure was complete, his illusions shattered, and as for me, the next chapter of my life was just beginning, one where I would rebuild stronger, wiser, and without the shadow of Nate's betrayal hanging over me. As the door closed behind him, I felt a sense of closure. The drama and revenge had played out, leaving behind a lesson in its wake. For Nate, a future filled with regret. And for me, a world of possibilities, free from the chains of a love that had turned toxic. The story of Nate and Alex was a cautionary tale, one that would serve as a reminder of the price of deceit. And as I looked ahead, I knew that the best revenge was not just in the suffering of those who had wronged me, but in the life I would build from the ashes of their betrayal. The days following Nate's departure were filled with a quiet that spoke volumes. It was the calm after the storm, a peace I had longed for yet felt oddly unsettling. The final act of my revenge was nearing, the stage set for a confrontation that would seal Nate's fate and liberate me from the past. I was sorting through the last of Nate's belongings, a symbolic gesture of closure, when the doorbell rang. Standing on my doorstep was not Nate, as I had half expected, but Alex, no longer the confident interloper but a figure of confusion and regret. "Eliza, may I come in?" Alex's voice was timid, a stark contrast to the boldness I had witnessed before. I hesitated, my initial instinct to shut the door in his face, but the desire for answers, for an understanding of the role Alex had played in this sordid tale stayed my hand. Inside, Alex sat awkwardly, a man out of place in a home that had once been filled with laughter and love. I owe you an apology, Alex began, his gaze fixed on the floor. For everything. An apology? I echoed, the words sounding hollow. Do you even understand what you've done? Alex flinched, the weight of his actions a visible burden. I realize now I was a tool in Nate's game. I believed his lies just as you did. The confession was unexpected, a glimpse into the complexity of the situation I hadn't considered. You were fooled by him too? Yes, I thought we had something real, but I was just convenient, for lack of a better word. The irony of the situation was not lost on me. Alex, much like myself, had been deceived by Nate's facade. But while my pain stemmed from a betrayal of vows, Alex's was born of a misplaced trust. And now? I asked, curiosity overcoming my resentment. Now I'm left with nothing. No Nate, no future, just the fallout of a relationship built on lies. The conversation was a revelation, the lines between victim and villain blurred. Alex's role in my story was not as clear-cut as I had believed. His presence not the cause of my suffering, but a symptom of Nate's deceit. You know, Alex, I spent so long blaming you, hating you for what happened, but now, I see that we were both pawns in Nate's game. Alex looked up, his eyes meeting mine for the first time since he had entered. I never meant to hurt you, Eliza. I hope you can believe that. I do, I replied, the truth of the statement surprising even myself. And I hope you can move on from this, learn from it as I have. As Alex stood to leave, there was a mutual understanding between us, an acknowledgement of the pain we had shared and the strength found in its wake. Thank you, Eliza, for listening, and for the forgiveness I don't deserve. With that, Alex walked out of my life, leaving behind a story of love, betrayal, and the search for redemption. And as I watched him go, I realized that the best revenge was not in the suffering inflicted on those who wrong us, but in the grace we find within ourselves to move beyond the pain. The fallout of Nate's betrayal had brought me to the lowest point in my life, but it had also shown me the resilience of the human spirit, the capacity for forgiveness, and the endless possibilities that lay on the other side of forgiveness. My story with Nate had ended, but my journey was just beginning, a journey of healing, discovery, and newfound freedom. And as the door closed behind Alex, I felt a chapter of my life closing with it, making way for a new beginning, one where the scars of the past would no longer define my future.
The sharp scent of garlic fills my kitchen as I dice it methodically, each precise cut a meditation. Through the window, golden hour bathes our manicured backyard in amber light. Everything looks perfect from here, the way Tom likes it, the way I've learned to keep it. My phone buzzes. A text from Marissa. Still on for yoga tomorrow? I'm about to reply when I hear Tom's car in the driveway earlier than usual. My hands automatically move faster, determined to have his favorite pasta ready. 15 years of marriage have programmed these little dances into my muscles. Lisa? His voice carries from the foyer, tight with something I can't place. Where are you? Kitchen, I call back, sliding the garlic into sizzling oil. You're home early. He appears in the doorway, still in his suit, but loosened somehow. Tie askew, collar unbuttoned. The sight triggers a flutter of unease in my stomach that I immediately push down. Rough day? I ask, reaching for the wine opener. It's our routine. He vents, I pour, we reset. Something like that. He checks his phone, fingers tapping rapidly. Listen, I have to handle some things in my study. Call me when dinner's ready. Before I can respond, he's gone. The wooden floors creak above me as he climbs the stairs, each step somehow heavier than usual. I stand frozen, wooden spoon dripping sauce onto the counter. This isn't the first time lately. Last week it was a sudden client emergency during our anniversary dinner. Before that, a weekend conference that hadn't been on his calendar. Small things, really, except... I wipe my hands and pull open the junk drawer, fishing out the crumpled receipt I found in his pants pocket during laundry last Sunday. $347 at Tiffany's, dated 3 weeks ago. My birthday was months ago, and Christmas is far off. I've seen no jewelry. The sauce starts to bubble aggressively. I stir it mechanically, mind spinning through a mental catalog of other odd moments. The faint floral scent on his shirts sometimes. Nothing I own. The sudden password change on his phone. The late nights at the office that Julian never seems to know about when I run into him. My phone buzzes again. Marissa. Hello? Earth to Lisa? I start typing, sorry, cooking dinner, but stop. The words feel hollow, like everything else right now. Through the ceiling, I hear Tom's muffled voice. He's talking to someone. The garlic bread timer dings, making me jump. I pull it from the oven on autopilot, muscle memory taking over while my mind races. Everything looks perfect. The bread golden brown, the sauce rich and fragrant, the table set with our wedding china. Perfect. The way Tom likes it, the way I've maintained it. I set the bread down harder than necessary. Crumbs scatter across the pristine counter. Tom? I call up the stairs. Dinner's ready. 5 minutes, he shouts back. His voice sounds strange, strained. I stand at the bottom of the stairs looking up at his study door, the heavy oak panel that's always closed lately. The sauce bubbles behind me, but I barely hear it over the blood rushing in my ears. My phone buzzes a third time, not Marissa now, a number I don't recognize. The text preview makes my heart stop. He won't tell you about us, so I will. Check his study. I delete it immediately, hands shaking. Above me, Tom's voice continues its muffled conversation. I could go up there right now. The door isn't locked, I don't think. I could... Sorry for the wait, Tom says suddenly from the top of the stairs, making me stumble backward. Important client call. I paste on a smile, hating how easily it comes. No problem. Everything okay? Fine. He straightens his tie, not quite meeting my eyes. Just fine. We sit down to eat, the perfect couple at our perfect table. I watch him twirl pasta around his fork, commenting on the sauce, asking about my day. Everything normal, everything fine. Except for the password-protected phone face down by his plate. Except for the mystery text burning a hole in my deleted folder. Except for the study door upstairs, closed but maybe not locked, holding who knows what secrets behind its solid oak face. I take a sip of wine and make all the right responses, but my mind is already upstairs wondering what I'll find when I finally open that door. The bedroom clock reads 2:37 a.m. Tom's breathing beside me is too even, too measured. He's awake too, pretending just like I am. The space between us in our king-sized bed might as well be an ocean. I wait another 23 minutes. When his breathing finally shifts into genuine sleep, I ease out of bed. The hardwood floor is cold under my bare feet as I creep down the hallway. The study door looms before me. My hand trembles as I reach for the handle, expecting resistance. It turns. Of course it does. Tom thinks I'm asleep. Think I'm still the trusting wife who never questions. Moonlight streams through the window, casting strange shadows across his desk. I ease into his chair, the leather still holding warmth from his body. His laptop sits closed, mocking me. I know it's password protected. I've watched him shield the keyboard enough times lately. But there, in the bottom drawer, is the old external hard drive he uses for backups. The one he forgot I know about. The one that doesn't ask for passwords. My fingers feel numb as I connect it to my phone. Files populate the screen. Endless folders of business documents. Boring, normal, until... Found something interesting? I nearly drop my phone. Tom stands in the doorway, silhouetted against the hall light. My heart hammers so hard I'm sure he can hear it. The words die in my throat as he steps into the room. Go ahead, he says, voice eerily calm. Open the folder marked ML Properties. My fingers move without my permission. The folder opens to reveal hundreds of photos. My stomach lurches as I scroll. Tom with a woman I don't know, dining at expensive restaurants, walking on beaches, kissing in what looks like a hotel room. Her name is Maureen, he says, still in that terrible, calm voice. And yes, before you ask, those are recent. The most recent was taken yesterday. Yesterday, I repeat numbly. When you said you were having dinner with Julian. Julian knows. He's been covering for me. Tom sits on the edge of his desk, looking down at me. They all know Lisa. Have for months. The room spins slightly. I grip the desk edge, anchoring myself in reality. How long? Does it matter? How long? He sighs. 2 years, give or take. 2 years. 2 years of lies, of perfect dinners and morning kisses and weekend brunches with friends who knew, who smiled and hugged me and knew. There's more, he says quietly. I laugh, the sound harsh in the midnight quiet. More than a 2-year affair? More than our friends lying to my face? What could possibly... He reaches past me, takes control of my phone. A few taps bring up another photo. A little girl, maybe 3 years old, with Tom's eyes and smile. Her name is Emma, he says. She's mine, ours, Maureen and mine. The room goes very still, very quiet. I can hear blood rushing in my ears, feel my pulse in my fingertips where they press against the cool desk surface. You have a daughter, I whisper. Yes. With her. Yes. While we were trying for our own baby. My voice rises slightly. While I was taking fertility drugs and going to specialists and crying myself to sleep because I couldn't give you a child. He has the grace to look away. Lisa, don't. I stand so quickly the chair slams back into the wall. Don't you dare try to explain this. You were never supposed to find out, he says, as if that makes it better. As if that's not the worst part of all. I move past him toward the door, but he catches my arm. Where are you going? Let go of me. My voice sounds strange in my ears, cold and sharp as ice. We need to talk about this, about how we handle it. I wrench my arm free. Handle it? Like you've been handling it for 2 years? Like our friends have been handling it? Lisa, please. I'm going to Marissa's, I say, already moving down the hallway. Then I stop, turn back. No, not Marissa's. She knew too, didn't she? They all knew. His silence is answer enough. I grab my keys, my phone still clutched in my other hand. The evidence is there now, safely backed up to my cloud storage. Every photo, every email, every lie documented in perfect digital clarity. What are you going to do? He calls after me. I pause at the front door, hand on the knob. I don't know yet, I tell him honestly. But I promise you this, you're going to wish I'd never found out. The door closes behind me with a soft click that feels like the end of everything, and the beginning of something else entirely. The morning sun feels wrong on my face as I sit in Taya's kitchen, watching her make coffee. My little sister, the only person I could think to call. The only one I'm sure wasn't part of Tom's conspiracy of silence. You need to eat something, she says, sliding a plate of toast toward me. I shake my head. I need to figure out what to do next. My voice sounds hollow, even to me. I've been up all night, scrolling through the evidence I copied. Each photo feels like a fresh slap. First, you need a lawyer. Taya sits across from me, her expression fierce. Then you need to take him for everything he's worth. I stare into my untouched coffee. It's not that simple. Like hell it isn't. She reaches for my hand. Lisa, he had a whole second family, while you were... She stops, probably remembering all those nights she held me while I cried about failed fertility treatments. My phone buzzes. Another message from Tom. Please come home. We can work this out. I turn the phone face down. I need to talk to Marissa first. Why? She knew and didn't tell you. Exactly. I stand up, sudden energy coursing through me. I need to know why. I need to understand how everyone could just watch me live a lie. Taya's face softens. Want me to come with you? I shake my head. This is something I need to do alone. The drive to Marissa's house feels surreal. How many times have I made this trip, thinking I was going to see my best friend? The woman who held my hand through every disappointment, who knew exactly why those disappointments cut so deep. She opens the door before I can knock. Lisa, thank God, I've been trying to call... Don't. I push past her into the house. Just don't pretend you care now. Of course I care. She follows me into her living room. That's why I never told you. It would have destroyed you. I whirl to face her. As opposed to what? Finding out like this? Finding out everyone knew except me? I wanted to tell you so many times. Her voice cracks. But Tom said... Tom said what? The words come out like ice. What could he possibly have said to justify helping him hide a child from me? While I was taking hormones and scheduling procedures and thinking something was wrong with me? Marissa sinks onto her couch. He said he was protecting you. That telling you would only cause pain when you were already dealing with so much. And you believed him? No. She meets my eyes. I believed he would leave you if I told. And then you'd have nothing. The laugh that escapes me sounds almost hysterical. Nothing? I already had nothing. Just a beautiful lie that everyone helped maintain. Lisa, did you meet her? The question comes out before I can stop it. His daughter? Marissa's silence is answer enough. Of course you did. I moved toward the door, needing air. Everyone did. Probably at parties I wasn't invited to, right? Special gatherings for Tom's real family? It wasn't like that. She stands, reaching for me. Julian arranged everything. He kept the two worlds separate. I freeze. Julian? Tom's business partner, Julian? Something flickers across Marissa's face. I shouldn't have said that. No. I turn back slowly. Tell me more about Julian's role in all this. She shakes her head. Lisa, don't. Just focus on your divorce. Take what you can and start over. But something clicks in my mind. The business trips, the client meetings. Julian wasn't just covering. He was organizing it all, wasn't he? Using the company to hide everything? Lisa, please. The company I helped them start. My voice rises. With my inheritance money, the company that's half mine on paper. Marissa's face goes pale. You can't prove any of that. But I'm already pulling out my phone, scrolling through the copied files with new understanding. Business expenses, travel records, money movements that suddenly make much more sense. Actually, I say quietly, I think I can. What are you going to do? I look at the woman I thought was my best friend, seeing her clearly for the first time. I'm going to talk to Julian, and then I'm going to burn everything to the ground. I leave her standing there calling my name. In my car, I pull up Julian's contact information. My hands shake slightly as I type, "We need to talk. About Maureen, Emma, and the company finances. Your office, 1 hour." His response comes almost immediately. Lisa, whatever you're thinking, don't. I start the car, a strange calm settling over me. They all thought they were protecting me, keeping me safely in the dark. Time to show them exactly what I can do in the light. Julian's office still smells like the leather furniture I helped him pick out 5 years ago. He stands as I enter, his face a mask of practiced concern. Lisa, I know you're upset. Sit down. My voice doesn't waver. Show me the real books. He blinks. I don't. The separate accounts, the ones you've been using to fund Tom's other life. I place my phone on his desk, screen up. I have the transfer records from the external drive. I just need you to explain them to me. His shoulders sag as he sinks back into his chair. It's more complicated than you think. Then uncomplicate it. I sit across from him, forcing myself to meet his gaze. Start with how much of my money you used. He opens his laptop, types briefly. Nothing from your initial investment. We're not stupid. No, I say softly, just cruel. His fingers pause on the keyboard. Lisa, I never wanted... The numbers, Julian. Now. He turns the screen toward me. Spreadsheets fill the display. Dates, amounts, account numbers. My eyes catch on a recurring transfer. $5,000 monthly to something called ML Care. Maureen Little, Julian explains, watching me, for Emma's expenses. $60,000 a year. I do the math automatically. From company profits I'm entitled to half of. Technically, yes. He leans back. But if you pursue this, it gets ugly for everyone. The company's reputation. My reputation was destroyed the moment my husband fathered a child with another woman. I scroll through the records, memorizing details, while using my company to fund it. Your company? Something shifts in his tone. The company you haven't set foot in for 3 years? That Tom and I built while you played housewife? The words hit like a physical blow. I was trying to have a baby. And how did that work out? I stand so quickly my chair topples backward. Julian raises his hands, face softening. I'm sorry. That was cruel. But Lisa, you need to understand. This isn't just about Tom's affair. There are other things. Things you don't want to know. Try me. He shakes his head. Go home. Let the lawyers handle the divorce. Take your settlement and start fresh. Like Isabel did? His face goes still. What? I called her this morning. I retrieve my phone, pull up the recording app. My old college roommate, Tom's ex-girlfriend, the one who mysteriously sold her shares in the company right before her own divorce. Lisa. I press play. Isabel's voice fills the office. They threatened to expose my brother's addiction issues if I fought for my share. Said they'd make sure he lost his medical license. I had to sign everything over. Julian's face has gone gray. Turn that off. I do, but keep my finger hovering over the screen. How many others? How many people have you and Tom strong-armed out of what's rightfully theirs? He stands, moves to his window. What do you want? Everything. My voice is steel. My full share of the company. Compensation for all the hidden transfers. Public acknowledgement of what you did. Or I take this recording, those financial records, and evidence of every illegal thing you've done to the SEC. I move toward the door. You have 24 hours to decide. He'll fight you. Julian turns back to me. Tom, he'll make this ugly. It's already ugly. I pause in the doorway. The difference is, now I'm done playing nice. My phone buzzes as I reach my car. A text from an unknown number. I hear you're asking questions. Coffee? Maureen. My hands shake as I type back. Where? The response comes immediately. The Grove Cafe, 30 minutes. I start the car, heart pounding. I should say no. Should let the lawyers handle everything. Should. Another text appears, this one with a photo. The little girl from Tom's photos, Emma, smiling at the camera, ice cream on her nose. She has Tom's eyes, the eyes I once dreamed our child would have. She should know her whole family, Maureen writes, even the complicated parts. I put the car in drive, pointing it toward the Grove. Tom, Julian, Marissa, they all thought they were protecting me by keeping me in the dark. Time to show them what I can do with a little light. And maybe, just maybe, time to meet the little girl who should have been mine. The Grove Cafe bustles with lunch crowd energy, but I spot Maureen immediately. She's exactly as beautiful as in the photos, wearing a crisp white blouse that probably costs more than my entire outfit. And next to her, my breath catches. Emma sits in a booster seat, coloring with intense focus. Dark curls fall across her forehead just like Tom's do when he's concentrating. Used to. Like they used to. Lisa. Maureen stands, extending her hand like this is a business meeting. Thank you for coming. I ignore her hand, sliding into the seat across from them. Emma looks up, studies me with Tom's eyes. Hi, she says brightly. I'm Emma. I'm 3.5. Hi, Emma. My voice cracks slightly. I'm Lisa. She knows who you are, Maureen says quietly. We don't lie to her. The irony makes me laugh. No? Just to me? Maureen signals a server, orders coffee for us both. Emma returns to her coloring, humming softly. I know you hate me, Maureen says once the server leaves. You have every right to. Hate you? I lean forward, keeping my voice low. I don't even know you, that's the point. You've known about me for years, watched me try to have a baby, watched me fall apart. But I'm just learning about you, about her. Emma looks up at the tension in my voice. Maureen smooths her hair. Baby, why don't you go show Miss Katie your drawing? Once Emma skips off to the counter, Maureen's composed facade cracks slightly. I never meant for any of this. But you let it happen. For years. What would you have done? Her eyes flash. I was pregnant, alone. He promised to take care of us, to be there for Emma. Said he'd leave you eventually. The coffee arrives. I wrap my hands around the warm mug, needing an anchor. And you believed him? I wanted to. She stirs her coffee endlessly. Until I saw you at that charity gala last year. You were so real. Not just some abstract obstacle anymore. A person, hurting. I remember that gala. Remember crying in the bathroom after someone asked when Tom and I would have kids. Why now? I ask. Why agree to meet me? Because... She stops as Emma returns, proudly displaying her drawing. It shows 3 figures, a tall man, a woman in a dress, and a small girl between them. It's my family, Emma announces. Daddy says we can go to the zoo next weekend. The crayon snaps in my hand. Red wax crumbles onto the table like drops of blood. Emma, sweetie, Maureen says quickly, why don't you get another crayon from Miss Katie? Once Emma's gone again, Maureen leans forward. That's why. She deserves better than secrets and lies, than rushed weekends and hidden photos, than a father who... She stops, glancing around. Who what? She pulls out her phone, slides it across the table. Text messages fill the screen. My stomach lurches as I read. He's doing it again, Maureen whispers. There's another woman. Has been for months. The messages blur as tears fill my eyes. Not from sadness this time, from rage. That's why I contacted you, she continues, not just for Emma, not just for you, but because he needs to face consequences, finally. I look at Emma, chatting animatedly with the barista, at Maureen, whose perfect facade has crumbled to reveal something raw and familiar. I have a plan, I say slowly. But it would change everything, for everyone. Good, Maureen's voice hardens. Everything needs to change. My phone buzzes. Julian. Whatever you're thinking, remember there are innocent people involved. I look at Emma again, at her drawing of the perfect family that never existed. I need your help, I tell Maureen. Your testimony, your records, everything. You'll have it. She reaches across the table, grips my hand. Make him pay, not just for us, for the next woman he tries to destroy. Emma returns, crawling into her mother's lap. Can we get ice cream? Not today, baby. Maureen kisses her head. But maybe soon Lisa can take you for ice cream. Would you like that? Emma beams at me. Tom's smile on her innocent face. I stand abruptly. I have to go. I'll be in touch about everything. Outside, I lean against my car, gulping air. My phone buzzes again. Tom, where are you? We need to talk. I start the car, hands steady now. They're right. Everything needs to change. Starting with me. Time to show Tom exactly what happens when you underestimate the woman you thought you could replace. The bottle of wine between Marissa and me is almost empty. After everything, I still ended up here, on her couch at midnight, like countless nights before, except nothing is the same. I can't believe you met her, Marissa says, refilling our glasses. What's she like? Beautiful, poised, everything I'm not. I stare into my wine. No wonder he... Don't. She grabs my hand. Don't you dare finish that sentence. Why not? It's true. I was so focused on trying to have his baby that I forgot to be... I gesture vaguely at myself. Whatever he wanted instead. Lisa. Marissa's voice sharpens. He didn't cheat because of you. He cheated because he's a lying bastard who... A knock at the door cuts her off. We freeze, exchanging glances. Expecting someone? I whisper. She shakes her head, moving to the door. Through the peephole, she gasps softly. It's Julian. My pulse quickens. Don't... But she's already opening the door. Julian steps in, looking exhausted. I knew I'd find you here. Following me now? I stand, proud that I only sway slightly. That's not creepy at all. Tom knows you met Maureen. He runs a hand through his hair. He's not handling it well. Good. The wine makes me bold. How's he handling the SEC investigation I launched this afternoon? Julian's face goes slack. You what? Anonymous tip. I smile tightly. About certain financial irregularities. They're very interested in those hidden accounts you showed me. Jesus Christ, Lisa. He sinks onto the couch. Do you have any idea what you've done? Exactly what you all forced me to do. I turn to Marissa. Pour him a drink. He's going to need it. Lisa, please. Julian accepts the wine. This isn't just about Tom anymore. This could destroy everything, everyone. Should have thought of that before you helped him build a second life with my money. Your money? He laughs harshly. You really don't get it, do you? Tom was embezzling long before Maureen, before Emma. The company's finances are... He trails off, drinking deeply. The room spins slightly. What are you saying? I'm saying there's worse than affairs and secret children. Julian leans forward. Much worse. And if the SEC starts digging... My phone buzzes. Tom's name appears, but the text is from an unknown number. I have proof of everything. Meet me tomorrow? B. Who's B? Marissa asks, reading over my shoulder. Brian. Julian's voice is quiet. The private investigator Tom hired to watch you last year, when he thought you were getting suspicious. The wine turns to acid in my stomach. He had me followed? Brian found nothing. Julian stands. But he kept watching, kept collecting evidence. On Tom. Another text appears. Parking garage. Noon tomorrow. Come alone. B. Don't. Julian reaches for my phone. Whatever he's offering, it's not worth it. I pull away. Like you get a vote in what I do anymore. Lisa. Marissa touches my arm. Maybe he's right. Maybe this is getting too dangerous. I look between them, my former best friend and my husband's corrupted business partner, both trying to protect me in their own twisted ways. You know what's dangerous? My voice trembles. Watching someone you love destroy themselves, trying to be perfect. Believing something's wrong with you because you can't give them what they want. That's dangerous. So, what's your plan? Julian demands. Meet some random PI in a parking garage? Risk everything for revenge? Not revenge. I type back to Brian. I'll be there. Justice? Julian scoffs. There's no justice here, only casualties. Then I guess I'll be one more. I grab my purse. But I'm done being the only casualty who didn't choose it. Where are you going? Marissa calls as I reach the door. To get some sleep. I pause, hand on the doorknob. Tomorrow's going to be a big day. Lisa. Julian's voice stops me. There are things you don't know. Things that could hurt you worse than anything Tom's done. I turn back, meet his eyes. That's where you're wrong. Nothing could hurt worse than living in the dark, than being the only one who didn't know. Outside, the night air clears my head slightly. My phone buzzes one final time. Maureen. Whatever you're planning, count me in. We both deserve the truth. I start my car, pointing it toward home. Tomorrow, I'll meet Brian. I'll learn whatever ugly truths Julian fears. And then I'll bring everything into the light, no matter who burns. The parking garage is eerily quiet at noon. My footsteps echo between concrete pillars as I follow Brian's texted directions to the 3rd level. Each step feels heavy with purpose, with the weight of what's coming. He's waiting by a black SUV, looking exactly like what he is. An ex-cop turned PI, weathered face, and watchful eyes. A manila envelope rests on the hood between us. Mrs. Henderson, he nods. Glad you came. Just Lisa now. I eye the envelope. Is that everything? Everything I collected on Tom over the past year. He taps it. But there's something you should know first. That he hired you to watch me? That he fired me when I found something else instead. Brian opens the envelope, spreads photos across the hood. Something bigger than affairs or hidden accounts. My breath catches. The photos show Tom with men I don't recognize, exchanging briefcases in dark parking lots like this one, meeting in expensive restaurants, passing documents under tables. Corporate espionage, Brian explains. Your husband's been selling company secrets to competitors, but that's not the worst part. He pulls out more photos. Tom and Julian arguing violently in Tom's study. Julian looking terrified, Tom's hand fisted in his collar. Julian's not a willing participant anymore, Brian says quietly. Tom's been blackmailing him for months, threatening his family. My hands shake as I gather the photos. Why are you showing me this? Because in an hour, Tom's hosting that charity luncheon at the Riverside Hotel. All your social circle will be there. Perfect time to expose everything, right? I nod slowly. That was the plan. It's also exactly what Tom expects. Brian leans against his car. He's ready for it. Has a whole speech prepared about your mental state, your jealousy, your inability to accept that you couldn't give him children. Bile rises in my throat. Of course he does. Of course he's turned even this into a weapon against me. So, what's your suggestion? He hands me a USB drive. This contains everything. The affairs, the financial fraud, the corporate espionage, enough to destroy him completely. And nothing. He straightens. What you do with it is up to you. But remember, sometimes the best revenge isn't the most obvious one. My phone buzzes. Maureen. In position at the luncheon. Ready when you are. Then Julian. Please don't do this. Not like this. And finally Tom. I know what you're planning. Don't embarrass yourself. I look at the photos again. At Tom's face in each one. Not the loving husband I thought I knew, but a stranger. A dangerous one. Thank you, I tell Brian, gathering everything into my purse, for showing me the truth. What are you going to do? I check my watch. 45 minutes until the luncheon. Something unexpected. The Riverside Hotel lobby gleams with old money elegance. I stride through it, head high, heels clicking on marble. The ballroom doors are open, showing round tables and milling guests. Tom stands at the podium, doing his final sound check. He freezes when he sees me, but recovers quickly. Lisa! His public smile appears. I didn't think you'd come. Of course I came. I match his smile. I wouldn't miss this for anything. His eyes narrow slightly. Whatever you're planning. Tom, I touch his arm, feel him tense. I'm not planning anything. I just came to say goodbye. What? I press the USB drive into his hand. Everything Brian collected is on here. Everything you've done. To me, to Julian, to the company. Lisa, I'm not going to expose you. I step back. I'm not going to destroy you. You know why? He stares at the drive. Why? Because that's what you do. And I'm not you. I turn to leave, but his hand catches my wrist. Wait, what are you going to do? I already did it. I smile, genuinely this time. Check your email. The SEC received an anonymous tip about corporate espionage an hour ago. They're probably at your office right now. His face drains of color. Goodbye, Tom. I pull free. Give Emma a kiss for me. I walk out of the ballroom, out of the hotel, into the bright afternoon sun. Behind me, I hear the first murmurs as federal agents enter through the side door. Sometimes the best revenge isn't about public humiliation or dramatic confrontations. Sometimes it's about walking away on your own terms, head high, leaving chaos in your wake. My phone buzzes one last time. Taya, you okay? For the first time in days, my hands don't shake as I type back. I will be. The morning news plays quietly as I pack the last box from Tom's study. Corporate espionage scandal, arrests made, stock prices plummeting. My name isn't mentioned, but I feel the weight of each headline. A knock at the door makes me pause. Not Taya. She has a key. Not Marissa. She's stopped trying. When I open it, Maureen stands there, holding Emma's hand. Hi, Lisa, Emma says brightly. Mommy says you're moving. I lean against the doorframe, looking at Maureen. What are you doing here? She wanted to say goodbye. Maureen's eyes are red-rimmed. And I needed to tell you something about the other woman Julian mentioned. I don't want to know. I start to close the door. You do. She stops it with her hand. Because it wasn't just another affair. It was his lawyer, the one handling the divorce. My chest tightens. What? He was planning to take everything. She guides Emma toward the garden. Go look at the flowers, baby. Once Emma's out of earshot, Maureen continues. The lawyer found loopholes, ways to void your claim to the company, to paint you as unstable. I sink onto the porch steps. Why are you telling me this? Because you saved us all. She sits beside me. Not just me and Emma, Julian's family, the other employees, everyone he would have destroyed eventually. I didn't do it for you. I know. She watches Emma examine a rose bush. You did it for you, finally. My phone buzzes, a text from Julian. SEC found everything. Tom's facing serious charges. Thank you. He'll never forgive me, I say quietly. Good. Maureen stands. Some forgiveness isn't worth having. Emma runs back, clutching a rose. For you, because you're sad. I take it, careful of the thorns. What makes you think I'm sad? Mommy says sometimes people are sad and happy at the same time. She beams, like when you do the right thing but it hurts. My throat tightens. From the garden, a car horn honks. That's our ride. Maureen takes Emma's hand. Time to go, baby. Wait. I duck inside, grab something from the last box. Emma, would you like this? It's a small silver frame, one I'd kept on my bedside table. Inside, a photo of Tom and me on our wedding day. Maureen inhales sharply, but I keep my eyes on Emma. For your memory box, so you know where you came from, all of it. Emma takes it carefully. Thank you. After they leave, I finish packing the study. Each box labeled, each memory categorized. 15 years of life, ready for storage or salvation. The doorbell rings again. This time, it's Brian. Thought you might want to see this. He hands me a folder. Tom's official confession. Turns out he had more secrets than even I knew. I don't open it. Keep it. I'm done looking backward. He studies me. You're stronger than he thought. I'm stronger than I thought. My phone lights up. A message from Taya. Moving trucks here. Ready? Before I can reply, another text appears. Tom, from whatever cell he's sitting in. I never meant to hurt you. I think of Emma's words about being sad and happy at once. About doing the right thing even when it hurts. I delete his message without responding. The moving truck pulls up outside. Through the window, I see Taya directing the movers, fierce and protective as always. Behind her, the sold sign swings gently in our perfect garden. I pick up the last box, lighter now without the wedding photo. My fingers brush the rose Emma gave me, already wilting but still beautiful, still carrying its thorns. One final text comes through. Marissa, I know you'll never forgive me, but I'm proud of you. I look around the empty study, at the marks on the carpet where Tom's desk sat, at the wall where I first saw those damning photos, at the door I finally had the courage to open. You're wrong, I text back. I do forgive you, I just don't need you anymore. Outside, Taya waves impatiently. The movers wait by their truck. A new life waits in a new city, one where no one knows my name or my story. I leave the rose on the windowsill. Let the next owners wonder about its meaning. Let them create their own story in these rooms. My story is elsewhere now. And for the first time in 15 years, I'm writing it myself.
I stood in the dimly lit room, the air thick with the scent of lilies and sorrow. The wake of Harold, my father-in-law, was more a display of pretense than a tribute to his life. My husband Alex clasped my hand tightly, his eyes a well of unshed tears. Vivian, Alex's mother, approached us with a thinly veiled sneer. Elaine, Alex, she began, her voice dripping with feigned sympathy. This is a family matter. Outsiders like Elaine should keep their distance. I felt a sting in her words. 3 years of marriage to Alex, and still I was an outsider. Greg and Nora, Alex's siblings, stood behind Vivian, their expressions echoing her disdain. What are you saying, Mother? Alex's voice trembled. Elaine is family. Family? Vivian scoffed. A family doesn't scheme for inheritance. We all know Harold left behind a fortune. 2 million, wasn't it? I bit back my anger. We never cared about the money. It was always about Harold. His kind smile had his gentle words of encouragement. Money? That's all you care about? Alex's words were barely a whisper, but they cut through the tension like a knife. Greg chimed in, his tone laced with contempt. Come on, Alex. Don't play the saint. We all know why she's here. Nora added with a smirk. Yeah. Heard how cozy Elaine was getting with Dad? Planning to seduce your way to the inheritance? Their accusations were like slaps to my face. Tears welled up, but I fought them back. I wouldn't give them the satisfaction. Enough! Alex's outburst silenced the room. We don't want your money. All we wanted was to say goodbye to a man we loved. Vivian's eyes narrowed, a cruel smile playing on her lips. Goodbye to a man you loved? Elaine, dear, were you in love with my husband? The room spun. Their cruel words, their unjust accusations, it was unbearable. I turned to Alex, my heart breaking for him. His family's true colors were laid bare, their greed and malice exposed. "Let's leave, Alex," I whispered, pulling him away. "We don't belong here." As we walked away, Vivian's mocking voice followed us. "Run away, Elaine. Remember, outsiders have no place here." Outside, the cold night air felt like a balm. Alex wrapped his arm around me, his body trembling with suppressed sobs. "I'm so sorry, Elaine," he muttered. "I never wanted you to be hurt like this." I hugged him, feeling his pain, our shared grief. "It's not your fault, Alex. We did everything for Harold, not for them." We stood there, under the starless sky, united in our sorrow and betrayal. The pain of loss was deep, but deeper still was the wound inflicted by his own family. As we drove back home, a silent resolve settled between us. We would not let Vivian and her children's venom taint our memories of Harold. We would find a way to honor him, away from the shadows of greed and lies. The chapter closes as Elaine and Alex leave the wake, their hearts heavy, but determined to seek justice in their own way, setting the stage for the unfolding drama and revenge. The clock in our living room struck midnight as Alex and I sat in silence, the events of the wake replaying in our minds. I could see the hurt in Alex's eyes, a pain that went deeper than tonight's insults. "Remember when we first met, Elaine?" Alex's voice broke the silence. "At that college art show, you were so passionate about your photography." I smiled, recalling our simpler days. "And you lost in your sketches. We were worlds apart from all this," I gestured vaguely, encompassing the current turmoil. Alex leaned back, his gaze distant. "I never told you the whole story about my family, did I? About why I was always so distant from them." I reached for his hand, encouraging him to continue. This was a story I knew only in fragments. My mother, Vivian, always favored Greg and Nora. They could do no wrong in her eyes. Alex began, his voice laced with a bitterness I rarely heard from him. "I was always the afterthought, the mistake." I squeezed his hand, feeling his old wounds reopen. "When I was a kid, Vivian never came to my school events. Greg and Nora got all the new clothes, the latest gadgets. I got their hand-me-downs if I was lucky." His words painted a picture of neglect, of a childhood shadowed by the constant reminder that he was less valued. "Despite all that, Dad, Harold was different. He tried, in his own way. He wasn't around much, but he made sure to be there when it mattered. He was the one who encouraged me to pursue art." I nodded, understanding the depth of his bond with Harold, despite the latter's limited presence. "When it was time for university, Vivian told me to get a job. No money for education," she said. "I managed with scholarships and loans. But it was never about the money, Elaine. It was about being seen, being acknowledged." His story revealed not just neglect, but a deep-seated desire for acceptance, something his family never gave him. "When we decided to get married, I saw how they treated you. The snide comments, the disrespect. It hurt, Elaine, but I thought we could stay away, build our own world." I remembered those early encounters, the thinly veiled jabs, the dismissal of our relationship. It was clear now, this disdain wasn't new. It was a pattern long established in Alex's life. "But Harold's illness changed everything," Alex continued. "We couldn't just stand by. And you, Elaine, you were there for him more than anyone." A tear slipped down my cheek as I remembered Harold's grateful smiles, his warm thanks every time we visited. "They think we're after the money," Alex said, his voice hardening. "But they're the ones obsessed with it. They never cared for Dad, only for what he had." I nodded, feeling a surge of anger. Their greed, their cruel accusations, it was all a reflection of their own twisted desires. "We'll find a way to set this right, Alex," I said firmly. "For Harold, for us, we won't let them tarnish his memory." Alex looked at me, his eyes filled with a mix of pain and determination. "We'll do it together, Elaine. We'll make sure they get what they deserve." As we sat there, united in our resolve, the path ahead was clear. We would fight back, not with their weapons of greed and deceit, but with the truth and the strength of our bond. The sterile smell of the hospital lingered in the air as Alex and I walked through the quiet corridors. Each step felt heavy, a reminder of the countless times we had made this journey to visit Harold. As we entered his room, the sight of Harold lying frail and pale on the hospital bed never failed to stir a deep sadness in me. Despite his condition, his eyes lit up when he saw us. "Elaine, Alex, my dear ones," Harold's voice was weak but filled with warmth. We approached his bedside, and I took his hand gently, noticing how it trembled slightly. "How are you feeling today, Dad?" Alex asked, concern etching his features. "Just being here with you both is a comfort," Harold replied, squeezing my hand. I couldn't help but think of Vivian, Greg, and Nora. Their absence in these crucial moments spoke volumes of their indifference. "Dad, we brought you some of your favorite music," I said, trying to bring some cheer into the room. "Let's listen together." As the soft melodies filled the room, I saw a tear roll down Harold's cheek. It was moments like these that made me realize the depth of his loneliness, exacerbated by his family's neglect. The door suddenly burst open, and in came Vivian, Greg, and Nora, their arrival like a storm disrupting the calm. "Harold, we're here!" "Oh, how terrible you look!" Vivian exclaimed, her tone lacking genuine concern. I felt Harold's grip on my hand tighten, a silent plea for strength. "Mother, we were just spending some quiet time with Dad," Alex said, his voice strained. Greg scoffed, looking around the room with disinterest. "Quiet time? More like making sure he remembers you in his will." Nora joined in, her voice dripping with sarcasm. "Elaine, still playing the devoted daughter-in-law, hoping to get a bigger piece of the pie?" Their words were like daggers, but I remained composed, not wanting to upset Harold. "We're here because we care for Dad, not for his money," I said firmly, meeting their accusing eyes. Vivian snorted. "Care? You're nothing but gold diggers. Harold, don't trust them." Harold, who had been silent, finally spoke. "Enough. Elaine and Alex have been my only comfort in these trying times. They are my family." His declaration was a blow to Vivian and her children. Their faces contorted in anger and disbelief. "You'll regret this, Harold," Vivian hissed, storming out of the room with Greg and Nora following her. Once they were gone, a heavy silence fell. Harold looked exhausted, the encounter having drained his remaining strength. "Elaine, Alex, I'm sorry you have to endure this," Harold whispered. "We're here for you, Dad, always," Alex replied, his voice filled with unwavering loyalty. As we left the hospital that evening, a resolute anger settled in my heart. Vivian and her children's greed and cruelty knew no bounds, but Alex and I were determined to stand against them, to protect Harold and honor his wishes. The injustice inflicted upon us, upon Harold, would not go unanswered. We were ready to fight back, to ensure that the true colors of our adversaries were brought to light. The days following Harold's funeral were a blur of grief and disbelief. Alex and I tried to find solace in each other, but the shadow of his family's callousness loomed over us. It was on a bleak Tuesday morning when the unexpected happened. A knock at our door revealed a stern-looking man in a suit, introducing himself as Mr. Simmons, Harold's attorney. "Mr. and Mrs. Carter, I'm here regarding Harold's last will and testament," Mr. Simmons announced, his tone formal yet sympathetic. Alex and I exchanged a look of surprise. We were unaware Harold had made a will. "Please come in," I said, leading him to the living room. As Mr. Simmons unfolded the documents, the anticipation in the room was palpable. Harold made it clear in his will that his entire estate, including the $2 million inheritance, is to be left to you, Alex, and Elaine, Mr. Simmons stated. The revelation hit us like a bolt of lightning. All this time, Harold had planned to leave everything to us. "But why us?" Alex asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "Harold felt that you two were the only ones who genuinely cared for him in his final years. He was deeply hurt by the rest of the family's indifference and greed," Mr. Simmons explained. The truth of Harold's feelings towards his family, now laid bare, was both a validation and a burden. We were honored by his trust, yet saddened by the extent of his loneliness and pain. "What about Vivian, Greg, and Nora?" I asked, my mind racing with the implications of this revelation. "Harold explicitly disinherited them. They are not to receive anything from the estate," Mr. Simmons replied, his tone indicating finality. I could almost hear Vivian's outraged scream, Greg's indignant protests, Nora's incredulous gasps. The news would hit them like a tidal wave, shattering their illusions of entitlement. "This will undoubtedly cause a stir," Alex said, a hint of worry in his eyes. "Yes, but Harold's wishes are legally binding. I will handle any disputes that may arise," Mr. Simmons assured us, his confidence somewhat easing our concerns. After Mr. Simmons left, Alex and I sat in silence, absorbing the gravity of the situation. Harold had entrusted us with his legacy, a clear message to his family that their behavior was inexcusable. The sense of justice was bittersweet. While we felt vindicated, it pained us to think of Harold's final days clouded by such decisions. "We need to prepare, Elaine," Alex said, determination in his voice. "Vivian and her children won't take this lightly. We must stand our ground." I nodded, feeling a mix of resolve and apprehension. "We'll do this together for Harold," I said, my voice steady. As we braced ourselves for the inevitable storm, I couldn't help but feel that this was just the beginning. The revelation of Harold's will was not just a testament to his love for us, but also a catalyst for the impending battle with his family. The confrontation was inevitable. Just days after learning of Harold's will, Vivian, Greg, and Nora appeared at our doorstep, their faces twisted in anger and disbelief. "You can't possibly think you're keeping all of Harold's money," Vivian spat as soon as we opened the door. Her words were like venom, but Alex and I stood firm, united in our resolve. "Harold made his wishes clear," Alex said calmly. "He left everything to us because we were the only ones who truly cared for him." Greg stepped forward, his eyes burning with rage. "You manipulated him. This is fraud." I felt a surge of anger at their accusations. "Manipulating? That's rich coming from you. You barely visited him, and now you claim rights to his estate?" Nora's voice was shrill with fury. "We're his real family, not some gold-digging wife and the son he barely tolerated." The cruelty in her words stung, but I refused to let it show. "That's where you're wrong," I countered. "Family isn't just about blood, it's about who's there in times of need, and you were all conspicuously absent." Vivian's face contorted in a mix of anger and desperation. "You can't do this to us. We deserve that inheritance." "It's not about what you think you deserve," Alex said, his voice steady. "It's about honoring Dad's wishes. He saw through your greed and selfishness." "You'll regret this," Greg threatened, stepping closer. "We won't let you get away with stealing our inheritance." I felt Alex's hand tighten around mine, a silent pledge of support. "This isn't theft, it's justice," I declared, meeting their hostile gazes head-on. "You neglected Harold, and now you're paying the price." Vivian's expression shifted to one of begrudging realization. "So, this is how it is. You've turned him against us, and now you're taking everything." "No, Vivian," Alex said, a hint of sadness in his voice. "You did this to yourselves. Your actions, your choices led to this moment." The air was thick with tension, the unsaid words hanging heavy between us. "Leave, now," I said firmly. "You have no claim here, not anymore." With one last glare, Vivian, Greg, and Nora turned and left, their departure leaving a trail of bitterness and resentment. Closing the door behind them, Alex and I let out a collective sigh. The battle lines were drawn, the fight for justice was just beginning, but we were ready, armed with the truth and the strength of our conviction. "We did the right thing, Elaine," Alex said, wrapping his arm around me. I nodded, feeling a sense of righteous vindication mixed with sorrow. We did for Harold. As we stood in the silence of our home, we knew this was far from over. But whatever lay ahead, we would face it together, standing tall against the greed and deceit that sought to overshadow Harold's final wishes. The aftermath of the confrontation left a charged atmosphere in our home. Alex and I knew this was just the beginning of a longer battle against Vivian, Greg, and Nora's greed. We were having dinner when the phone rang. Alex answered, and I could immediately tell from his tone that it was them again. "You can't possibly think we'll just walk away from this," Vivian's voice, shrill and agitated, echoed from the speaker. Alex put her on speakerphone, and I braced myself for another round of accusations. "We've seen lawyers, Alex. They say we have a case. You'll be hearing from us," Greg's voice threatened. I exchanged a look with Alex. "Let them try," I whispered. Alex spoke into the phone, his voice firm. "You heard, Mr. Simmons. Dad's will is clear and legally binding. You were disinherited for a reason." "You think you're so smart, but we'll see who gets the last laugh," Nora chimed in, her voice dripping with malice. "It's not about winning or losing," I said, my voice steady as I took the phone from Alex. "It's about what's right. Harold knew the truth about all of you." There was a pause, and then Vivian's voice returned, colder and more calculating. "You think you know everything, Elaine? We're his blood. That has to count for something." "It counted for nothing when you ignored him in his final years," I countered. "You'll regret this. We won't let you get away with it." Greg's voice was a mix of anger and desperation. "As far as we're concerned, this matter is closed," Alex said, ending the call. We sat in silence for a moment, the weight of the situation heavy on our shoulders. "They won't give up easily," I said, more to myself than Alex. "But we have the truth on our side," Alex replied, reaching for my hand. "Dad wanted us to have this. We'll honor his wishes, no matter what they throw at us." I nodded, feeling a renewed sense of purpose. Harold's final act had been one of love and trust towards us, and we would defend it with everything we had. Over the next few days, we prepared for the legal battle that loomed ahead. We gathered documents, spoke to Mr. Simmons, and fortified ourselves for the fight. Then, one evening, as we reviewed our strategy, the doorbell rang. Standing on our doorstep were Vivian, Greg, and Nora, their faces a mix of anger and defeat. "We want to talk," Vivian said, her voice lacking its usual confidence. "We have nothing to discuss," Alex replied, his stance unwavering. "Just hear us out," Nora pleaded, a rare note of sincerity in her voice. Reluctantly, we let them in. They sat across from us, their body language deflated. "We've been to several lawyers. They all say the same thing. The will is ironclad," Vivian admitted, her eyes avoiding ours. "So what do you want?" I asked, my tone cautious. We're sorry," Greg said, the words seeming to pain him. "We were wrong about Harold, about you." I looked at Alex, seeing the skepticism in his eyes mirrored in mine. "Sorry doesn't change what you did, what you said," Alex said coldly. "We know," Nora added, her voice quivering, "but we're family. Can't we find a way to move past this?" Alex and I exchanged a look, the decision clear between us. "There's no moving past this," I said firmly. "You made your choice, and now you have to live with it." They left soon after, their departure marked by a heavy silence. Alex and I sat back down, the finality of the situation sinking in. "We did the right thing," Alex said after a moment, his voice resolute. "We did," I agreed, feeling a mix of relief and sadness. "For Harold and for us." The battle was over, but the scars remained. We had stood our ground, defended Harold's legacy, and in doing so, had closed the door on a part of our lives that was filled with greed and betrayal. Months had passed since we had last seen Vivian, Greg, and Nora. The legal battle, as predicted, never materialized. Their threats had been nothing but hollow words, a final attempt to intimidate us. One evening, as Alex and I sat on our porch, enjoying the peaceful twilight, he broke the silence with a reflective tone. "Do you ever think about them?" he asked, gazing into the distance. "I try not to," I admitted. "But sometimes I wonder if they ever understood the pain they caused, not just to us, but to Harold." Alex nodded, a hint of sorrow in his eyes. "I doubt it. Their greed blinded them to everything else." The conversation drifted to other topics, but a part of my mind remained on that bitter family conflict. It was a chapter of our lives that had closed, but its echoes still lingered. A few days later, we received news that served as a stark reminder of the consequences of their actions. Through a mutual acquaintance, we learned of their downfall. Greg's business, already struggling, had collapsed under mounting debts. Nora, caught in her web of lies and deceit, faced a bitter divorce. And Vivian, abandoned by her children in her time of need, was left to grapple with her loneliness and remorse. Hearing of their misfortunes didn't bring us joy. There was no satisfaction in seeing them suffer, only a deep sense of pity and a reminder of the destructive power of greed. As we moved on with our lives, Alex and I made a conscious decision to focus on the positive. We invested Harold's inheritance wisely, ensuring his legacy would continue to support causes he believed in. We also started a small foundation in his name to help those in need, a fitting tribute to a man who had shown us so much kindness. Life had a way of coming full circle. A year after Harold's passing, we welcomed a new addition to our family, a baby boy we named Ethan. Holding him in my arms, I felt an overwhelming sense of love and hope. He was a new beginning, a chance to build a legacy of love and kindness, far removed from the shadows of greed and betrayal. As Ethan grew, we often told him stories of his grandfather Harold, ensuring his memory lived on in the heart of our family. We wanted Ethan to know the values Harold stood for: kindness, compassion, and integrity. Sitting on the porch one evening, watching Ethan play in the garden, Alex put his arm around me. "We made it through the storm," he said, a note of contentment in his voice. "We did," I replied, leaning into him. "And we built something beautiful from it." The journey had been fraught with pain and conflict, but it had led us to a place of peace and understanding. We had turned the bitterness of the past into a future filled with love and hope. As the sun set, casting a warm glow over our home, I realized that this was what Harold had wanted for us. A life of happiness, free from the toxic grasp of greed. And in that moment, I knew we had truly honored his legacy. Pregnant again? How utterly disappointing. Marla's words sliced through the tense silence like a butcher's knife. My stomach dropped as I slowly looked up from my plate at my mother-in-law's sneering face. Evan shifted uncomfortably beside me, but stayed silent as usual. Marla continued, her voice dripping with disdain. Another daughter, I assume? When are you going to give my son the heir he deserves? I felt the blood drain from my face as the weight of her words slammed into me. This was supposed to be a joyful celebration dinner for my pregnancy, but Marla had once again managed to turn it into a humiliation. Mother, please. Evan finally muttered, but she waved him off dismissively. Don't mother me. You're just as frustratingly submissive as your father was. If you don't control your wife, she'll keep popping out these disappointing female placeholders. Tears stung my eyes as I finally found my voice. Zoe is not a placeholder. She's our beloved daughter, and this pregnancy is still early. We don't know the sex yet. Oh, spare me. Marla rolled her eyes. With your atrocious track record, it's clearly another girl. You're a broodmare failure. The venom in her tone shook me to my core. Evan's head hung low, crushed by his mother's verbal lashing. Hurt and rage burned inside me, but I knew defending myself was futile against this woman's cruelty. I need some air, I managed to choke out, pushing back from the table. I had to escape before breaking down completely. Marla scoffed as I rushed away. Running away again, are we? Typical. I hurried out to the back patio, gulping in the cool night air as burning tears streaked my cheeks. How could she be so hateful and demeaning toward me? Footsteps approached, and I tensed, steeling myself for another barrage of insults. But it was Evan, his face etched with sadness and apologetic. Lena, I'm so sorry, she was completely out of line back there, he said softly, taking my hand. You know how important you and the kids are to me. Don't listen to her vitriol. I pulled my hand away, suddenly angry at his passivity. But I did listen, Evan. For 8 years, I've listened to her constant put-downs and cruelty toward me, toward Zoe. When are you finally going to stand up to your mother? Evan's eyes widened, then quickly averted. You know how she is. She'll never change, he mumbled weakly. I felt something inside me harden at his words. For the first time, I truly saw Evan's inability, or unwillingness, to protect me from his mother's abuse. In that moment, the illusion of our marriage began cracking before my eyes. As I looked into my husband's beaten, submissive stance, I realized with sinking dread that this pattern would never end. Marla's iron grip over him was unbreakable, and I was the perpetual target for her destructive need to dominate. Warily, I turned and headed back inside, leaving Evan standing alone with his spineless excuses. I sensed this was the beginning of an inescapable downward spiral that would alter my family forever. If only I knew then just how devastating the consequences would be. The tension hung thick in the air as Marla smoothed her silk blouse, a self-satisfied smirk playing across her lips. Lena, dear, I have some news that may shake things up a bit. I eyed her warily from across the kitchen counter. What are you talking about? Well, you know how concerned I've been about securing a legitimate heir for my son, she began in a mock sympathetic tone. A daughter is lovely, but it simply won't do for carrying on the family legacy. Rage simmered within me, but I bit my tongue. After the disastrous dinner weeks ago, I knew any protest would be futile against this woman's twisted agenda. Marla continued, so I took matters into my own hands to help solve this delicate issue. I introduced Evan to a wonderful young lady, Sienna. She's fertile, devoted, and more than capable of providing him with the son he deserves. The words hung in the air like a bad dream. But Marla's vindictive stare told me this was no nightmare. It was disgustingly real. You brought another woman into our marriage to have a baby with my husband? I sputtered, struggling to process this depths of her depravity. Oh, don't be so dramatic, she scoffed. I'm doing what's best for my son's future. You've proven quite incapable in that regard. The casual cruelty of her words struck me like physical blows. How could anyone be so utterly lacking in human empathy? You cruel, manipulative hag! I cried out, unable to contain my anger any longer. Does Evan even know about this vile scheme? A slow, satisfied smile spread across Marla's face. Why don't you ask him yourself, dear? On cue, Evan stepped into the room, flanked by a slim, overly made-up woman I didn't recognize. Sienna, I presumed. The look of sheepish contrition on my husband's face said it all. You allowed this? Your own mother brought another woman into our marriage to bear your child? I stammered, feeling the world crumbling around me. Evan couldn't meet my eyes. Lena, we've talked about how important carrying on the family line is. So you're just going to let your mother pimp out some cheap whore to get what she wants? I screamed, uncaring of the foul language as blinding rage took over. Sienna's eyebrows shot up in feigned indignation. Evan finally looked at me, his expression hardening to match his mother's callous demeanor. This is for the greater good, Lena. My duty as a man. If you were able to do your wifely duties properly, we wouldn't need to go to such extremes. His cold, rehearsed words lanced through my heart like daggers. This was really happening. My own husband was utterly betraying me in the most humiliating way possible, all with his mother's enthusiastic support. Marla chuckled at my stunned silence. Don't worry, dear. Once Sienna properly breeds, you can focus your energy on my granddaughter. We wouldn't want you feeling completely useless. Her words ignited an indescribable fury within me that I never knew I possessed. With a primal scream, I grabbed the nearest object, a heavy ceramic vase, and hurled it with every ounce of strength. It struck Marla squarely in her smug face, shattering viciously and spraying blood and ceramic shards across the room. Sienna shrieked in horror as Marla crumpled to the floor, clutching her ruined face and howling in agony. Chest heaving, I turned to Evan, seeing the shock and fear in his eyes. In that unrestrained moment, I knew my marriage had disintegrated into ashes. There would be no forgiving this ultimate betrayal. Marla's monstrous machinations had cut straight through the very core of my world. The only thing left was vengeance. The eerie silence hung heavy in the air as Marla's wails finally subsided. I stood motionless, fists clenched, glaring at the crumpled, bleeding form of my monstrous mother-in-law on the kitchen floor. Evan stared at me with a mixture of shock and fear. Beside him, Sienna shrank back, clearly shaken by my outburst, but still clinging to her role in this sick charade. You crazy bitch! Marla's trembling voice finally broke the tension, thick with a combination of pain and rage. I'll see you arrested for this. Assaulting me in my own home. Your home? I scoffed, unable to contain the sudden resurgence of fury rippling through me. This is my home, the home I made with my husband, the man you're trying to pimp out behind my back like some kind of degenerate mother-pimping monster. Marla opened her mouth to protest, but I cut her off with a raised hand. No, don't even try denying it, you hateful crone. I heard everything, how you willingly brought this woman into my marriage explicitly to cuckold your own son. I turned my fiery glare to Evan, who flinched as if struck. And you spineless coward, going along with your mother's demented plans, ready to stick your dick into the first fertile womb she picks for you. Lena, he began weakly, but I wasn't about to let him make pathetic excuses. Did you really think I wouldn't find out? That I'd just be a good little wifey while you knocked up some cheap hussy on the side? Hey! Sienna's shrill voice cut in, her fake-baked face contorting with indignation. I am not some hussy! Your bastard husband came on to me! I whirled on the overly made-up woman, feeling a cruel smile spread across my face. Did he now? So tell me, when you were spreading your legs for a very married man, did you stop to think about his innocent family you were helping to destroy? Sienna opened her mouth, but nothing came out. Deep down, even she realized how reprehensible her role was in this sordid scheme. Chuckling darkly, I turned back to Evan. Unfreaking believable. I gave you everything. A beautiful child, a loving home, an amazing life, and you were ready to just throw it all away to satisfy your mother's unhinged breeding fetish. Marla stirred, glaring up at me, her face already starting to grotesquely swell from the vase impact. You have no one to blame but yourself, you infertile. Enough, I roared, slamming my fist down on the counter, hard enough to make them all jump. I have had it with your bottomless well of cruelty and manipulation. If having a son is so obsessively important, then Evan is welcome to it. Striding over to a small desk, I snatched up a pen and a sheaf of papers, thrusting them toward Evan with cheeks burning. Separation agreement. You can have your son's situation, your freedom to breed some new little heirs with that plastic surgery disaster over there. Evan gaped, stunned into silence. Even Sienna seemed jolted by my actions as the gravity of the situation sank in. Well? I demanded through gritted teeth. Sign it and get out! Take your vile, treacherous mother and your stupid son quest and just go. I want you out of my house, out of my life. Slowly, numbly, Evan took the pen and stared at the agreement. A heavy pause seemed to blanket the room as Marla and Sienna looked on with matching expressions, a mixture of surprise and sickening satisfaction. Then, with a trembling hand, Evan scrawled his name in harsh strokes across the papers, officially ending our marriage in that single callous gesture, as his mother had always intended. Exhaling hard, I snatched the signed pages back from his hand, our eyes locking in one last, searingly intense glare. Then I turned and walked upstairs without another word, clutching the proof of my broken world and wondering how I would ever be able to piece my shattered life back together. The next few days passed in a numb blur. Evan and his mother had stormed out after the confrontation, taking their co-conspirator Sienna with them. An eerie silence descended over the house I once thought of as my loving home. I drifted aimlessly, my mind struggling to process the devastating implosion of my marriage. Logically, I knew signing those separation papers was the only recourse after Evan's unforgivable betrayal. And yet, the overwhelming sense of loss threatened to swallow me whole at times. Zoe, our 8-year-old daughter, seemed to pick up on the heavy tension despite my efforts to shield her. She became quieter, clingier, her usual bright exuberance dimming. "Mommy, where did Daddy go?" she asked one evening as we picked at our dinner in silence. I froze, unprepared for the question. Part of me wanted to proclaim the ugly truth, that her father had abandoned us to chase some atavistic need to breed an heir with another woman. But I couldn't bring myself to shatter her innocence so completely. "Daddy had to go away for a little while, honey," I hedged, struggling to keep my voice steady. "Work things." Zoe frowned, clearly picking up on my emotional disquiet. Ever the empath, just like her mother. "Are you sad, Mommy? Did you and Daddy have a fight?" "Something like that, baby," I managed, fighting back the lump swelling in my throat. "But everything will be okay, I promise." The lie tasted like ashes on my tongue, because in that moment there was no way to see how anything could ever be okay again. A sharp knock at the door jolted me from my reverie. Zoe looked up, eyes wide with something like hope. "Is that Daddy?" "Stay here, sweetie," I said quickly, rising to answer the door with trepidation curling in my stomach. But it wasn't Evan on the other side. Instead, a sharply dressed man in an expensive suit stood with a crisp folder in his hands. "Mrs. Redding," he asked brusquely without preamble, "I'm Mr. Collins, an associate of your husband's." An icy fist gripped my heart as I suddenly sensed where this was headed. The separation had clearly begun the legal fractures. "My firm has prepared these documents for you to review and sign," Mr. Collins continued, all business as he held out the folder. Hesitantly, I accepted the hefty stack of papers, dread settling like a cold stone in my gut. This was really happening, the death knell of my marriage after Evan's sickening betrayal. As I mechanically paged through the legalese, certain phrases jumped out in harsh simplicity. Petition for dissolution of marriage, rendered the covenant irreparably broken, division of assets favoring the male issue-bearing party. I felt the blood drain from my face as awful realization bloomed. This wasn't just a simple divorce agreement. It was Evan and his demonic mother wielding their wealth and influence to strip me of everything, my home, my life, my child, all in cruel pursuit of their deranged male heir vendetta. "You have 48 hours to review and sign these terms, Mrs. Redding," Mr. Collins stated flatly. "After that, my client will pursue more aggressive recourse if you fail to comply." The unmistakable threat laced his words like arsenic. Memories flashed of the unrestrained violence that ran in Marla's virulent veins, the vase, the bloodshed, of her unstoppable quest to destroy any obstacle to the grandchild she craved. My treacherous, spineless husband had clearly thrown in with his vile mother. He would stop at nothing to cut me out of his life completely, all for the unforgivable sin of bearing him a daughter instead of a son. A cold, dead feeling settled over me, the final vestige of our broken marriage crumbling to bitter ash. There would be no more tears, no more desperate pleas or self-delusions. I was truly and utterly alone now, except for my innocent little girl watching in sad confusion from the next room, the pure, bright spirit that was supposed to be my greatest joy. But in that stark moment she became my sole lifeline, my unbreakable reason to endure the coming storm. I turned to Mr. Collins, my jaw rigid. "Tell your client that after 48 hours he can expect to hear from my attorney," I stated in a toneless rasp, "because I'll be damned if I let him take my daughter too." With that, I shut the door in the lawyer's face. Then I turned and pulled a confused Zoe into my arms, holding her tiny form as if she were a life vest in a raging sea. There would be no surrender, no matter how viciously Evan and Marla tried to drown me. For Zoe's sake, I would find a way to stay afloat and make them pay dearly for their twisted sins. The next 48 hours were a blur of grim determination. I knew time was short before Evan and Marla would attempt to strip me of everything I held dear. First, I secured a shark of a divorce attorney, Caroline Weston. Steely, aggressive, and with a reputation for devouring entitled rich husbands like Evan. "This is one of the most blatant, unethical cases of alienation of affection I've ever seen," Caroline stated in a cold fury after I recounted the sordid details. "We're going to crucify this bastard and his Medea of a mother." Her words kindled a flame of hope that I could indeed survive this nightmare with my daughter and some shreds of dignity intact. Next was gathering ammunition. Any proof of Evan's misdeeds that could be leveraged in the coming war. I pored over financial records, discovering his company had been filtering money to an offshore account for years. Embezzlement and tax evasion, potentially criminal behavior if exposed. Perfect leverage. Finally, I arranged for Zoe's temporary relocation while the legal battle raged. My sister Nina, an elementary school teacher, lived 2 states over. I knew she could shelter and care for my sweet girl while I fought in the trenches. When the 48-hour deadline arrived, I was ready, or as ready as I could be. Mr. Collins arrived promptly with the same aloof disdain as before. "I trust you've had ample time to review the terms and come to an amenable decision," he stated flatly. In response, I slid the signed divorce petition across the table, but not the one he provided. The stack of papers bore Caroline Weston's imprimatur, every word thoroughly negotiated for maximum impact. Mr. Collins' eyes flashed with surprise as he scanned the unrecognized document, his brows knitting in disapproval. "This was not the agreement we discussed. My client will need to reevaluate these terms." "These are the terms," I stated coldly. "I refuse to be bullied or stonewalled. Every nefarious act, every awful betrayal has consequences." I slid the thick dossier of financial documentation across the table, watching Mr. Collins's face blanch slightly as he grasped the implications. "Your client's illegal corporate dealings have been rigorously catalogued by very credible forensic accountants," I added with a hint of vindictive satisfaction. "Any attempt to deprive me of my legal marital rights and claim over my daughter will be met with the full public revelation of these damning records." I allowed that threat to hang in the air. Evan's ego and insecurity about his business reputation were thinly veiled weak spots, traits his vile mother had eagerly exploited countless times. Now it was my turn to wield that leverage. Mr. Collins maintained an impressively impassive poker face as he studied the documentation, though a muscle twitched almost imperceptibly in his jaw. Perhaps he was already calculating how hard this battle could hit Evan's pocketbook. "I will present this counteroffer to Mr. Redding in full," he said finally, voice tight, "contingent on these materials remaining discreet for now." "See that you do," I said simply. "The meter is running on flaying his reputation and criminal liability wide open." With a curt nod, Mr. Collins collected the documents and departed, clearly reeling from this unanticipated turn of events. For the first time in a long time, I felt the faintest spark of hope, of reclaiming some portion of my life and dignity from Evan and Marla's grasping claws. But there was still one vital loose end to secure before the war began in earnest. I turned and gathered Zoe into my arms, fighting back fresh tears at her sad, bewildered expression. "Mommy," she said tremulously, "what's happening? I want Daddy to come home." I hushed her gently, stroking her soft hair. I know, baby, I know. But you have to go stay with Auntie Nina for a little while, okay? For your safety. Zoe's eyes widened slightly, picking up on the undercurrent of tension. But she nodded obediently. As I clutched her tiny form, I silently vowed to do whatever it took to protect my daughter's well-being, even inscribing her name permanently in the chasm dividing our family. There would be hurt and confusion, but I hoped she would eventually understand. Because in the end, I would make absolutely certain that Evan and Marla paid the ultimate price for their monstrous transgressions. Once that line was crossed, there was no going back. The divorce battle erupted with a fury I could scarcely have imagined. Evan and Marla clearly felt spurned by my refusal to capitulate, and were determined to crush me through overwhelming legal force and intimidation. Caroline proved to be worth every penny, matching their team's viciousness tit for tat. Accusations and exposures flew in both directions as dark secrets were mercilessly excavated. Marla launched a public smear campaign, portraying me as an unfit mother and spouse jealous of Evan's business success. We countered by leaking details of her deranged campaign to cuckold her own son for a male heir. It was a brutal, soul-destroying process. But I refused to surrender an inch, kept afloat by my determination to maintain stability for Zoe. Finally, after 6 excruciating months, cooler heads in Evan's camp prevailed in pushing for a negotiated settlement, an end to the scorched earth hostilities before any more radioactive scandals fully combusted. I'll never forget the heavy silence that fell over the sterile conference room as our respective legal teams arrived. Evan entered, shoulders squared but eyes hollowed by the long battle. Then Marla swept in, her face still bearing the faintest scars from the vase incident, twisted into her trademark sneer. I felt a brief thrill of satisfaction that at least I'd managed to mar her unbearably smug exterior. Greetings were dispensed with, having long abandoned such niceties. We came straight to business. My client is prepared to offer a full and impartial distribution of legitimate marital assets, provided certain conditions are met, Caroline stated firmly, including permanent renunciation of custodial claims over the minor child. I could feel Marla's glare burning a hole through me. Sacrificing any claim to Zoe was the heaviest concession, but a necessary one to secure safety and healing. To her credit, Caroline didn't flinch, as well as assurances that the unconventional reproductive circumstances during the marriage remained sealed and undisclosed. A harsh jab at the twisted heir conspiracy, and a not-so-veiled threat about potential criminal repercussions. Evan shifted uncomfortably at the allusion. Marla's scowl deepened. While such terms are highly irregular, their lead counsel replied stiffly, we are amenable to the equity distribution, provided indemnity against future potential actions. A ugly pause lingered. They knew their financial skullduggery had been thoroughly exposed and could jeopardize not just Evan's business, but potential imprisonment. So they had no choice but to negotiate a suppression of the whole sordid truth. The tables had finally turned in my favor. Of course, so long as commitments are adhered to, the matters will remain permanently sealed, Caroline stated, her shark-like smile just a touch too wide. The negotiation continued for hours, splitting immense assets and investments down to the finest decimal point. But in the end, we hammered out an agreement, secured by both sides the mutual sustaining silence. Marla looked utterly miserable, faced with irrevocably surrendering control over her son's life and Zoe's. While still obscenely wealthy, I knew the concessions represented a profound personal defeat, which fueled my resolve. I don't expect congratulations, Caroline told me in an undertone as the final paperwork was prepared. This whole situation is equal parts sickening and infuriating, but you stood your ground and secured the best path for your daughter's well-being. I could only nod numbly, my strength finally waning after the marathon ordeal. There was no jubilation or catharsis, only the cold satisfaction of having survived this battle, of inflicting some semblance of consequences on Evan and Marla for their grotesque transgressions, and ensuring a future of stability for Zoe. Sliding the notarized agreement across the desk, I met Marla's seething glare one last time. Don't ever set foot near me or my daughter again, you twisted, evil bitch. Too weary even to revel in her impotent sputtering at the insult, I simply stood and walked out, gathering the last remnants of my dignity to forge a path into this new, uncertain life. There was still one final loose end to tie up, and I intended to cut Marla's last thread of delusion with utmost precision. With the divorce settlement finalized and my financial future secured, I could finally turn my focus to rebuilding my life, our life, free from Evan and Marla's toxic orbit. My first priority was reintegrating with Zoe. The poor girl had been shuttled between relatives for months, kept at a cautious distance from the legal war zone raging between her parents. I could only imagine the confusion and hurt she must have felt. When Nina brought her home that first day, Zoe ran straight into my arms, her little body trembling with soft sobs. My heart shattered anew at her muffled cries. "I missed you so much, Mommy. I was so scared." "Shh, I know, baby," I soothed, fighting my own tears. "I missed you more than you could ever know, but it's okay now. We're going to be okay." She pulled back, her young face still so innocent yet bearing a new heaviness. "Is Daddy ever coming home?" A lump formed in my throat as I studied her deep brown eyes, so much like Evan's. How could I lie, yet also deprive her of hope? "Daddy can't be with us anymore, sweetheart," I managed carefully. "He made some choices that went against what we believe is right." Zoe's brow furrowed in confusion. "Did he do something bad?" "In a way, yes." I sighed, pulling her close again. "But you don't have to worry about any of that now. What matters is you and me and how we move forward from here, okay?" She nodded, seeming to grasp the simplicity of that concept, despite the complexities raging underneath. In that moment, I vowed to preserve her innocence, her trust, in whatever way I could. Over the following weeks, we began to rebuild our little family of two. With Evan's financial settlement, I was able to secure a fresh start, a cozy rental home away from the shattered remnants of our marriage, enroll Zoe in a new school, and realign my career trajectory in marketing communications. Slowly, smiles and warmth began returning to Zoe's youthful exuberance as our new normal solidified, no longer weighed down by that toxic undercurrent of dysfunction surrounding Evan and Marla. The only hiccup came when I received a terse communication from Sienna, Evan's former mistress, the woman he had intended to breed his heir with. "Your pathetic excuse for a husband came crawling back, in case you were wondering," her message read acidly. "But once I got a taste of his true self and that monster-in-law, I wanted no part of that dysfunctional freak show." She included documentation showing the exorbitant settlement she had demanded to preserve her silence and disappear from our lives for good. A final insult to injury, paid from my share of the divorce payout. Rather than anger, I felt only pity for Sienna's sad delusion that she'd been anything more than a dispensable pawn in Evan and Marla's twisted schemes, and I sensed her message held far more impact for them than for me. The ultimate failure and rejection of their disastrous heir-breeding plot. In a strange way, it felt like the last fading embers of that ugliness had finally burnt out completely, freeing me to turn my energy fully toward nurturing and protecting the family I did have, my ethereal bond with Zoe. There were still the occasional flare-ups from Marla's camp, grotesque tantrums lamenting her loss of control and grandchild, but I simply systemized blocking and containing her, preserving peace for Zoe at all costs. A few months after the finalized settlement, I received an awkward, rambling text from Evan out of the blue. "I know I have no right to darken your life any longer. The wreckage left behind is entirely my shame to bear. But I hope one day Zoe will understand that, despite everything, I did love her with all my heart." The words were a hollow echo, a desperate grasp for validation or absolution after his spinelessness shattered our family. I didn't bother responding, focused entirely on my new beginning, because that broken man's sad plea for sympathy couldn't reach me any longer. Not in the sanctuary of tranquility and love I had rebuilt around my beautiful daughter. Not when his vile deeds had finally caught up to him, leaving him utterly alone with his unbearable guilt. The years passed with surprising tranquility as I raised Zoe in our new peaceful life. There were moments of struggle and heartache, of course, but they paled in comparison to the constant toxicity that pervaded my marriage to Evan. As she grew into a brilliant, self-assured young woman, I made sure Zoe understood the basic truths of what tore our family apart, at least enough for her to recognize the inherent brokenness in her father and grandmother's value system. She never voiced resentment toward them, but a sort of detached pity. An intrinsic understanding of how their obsessive pursuit of an heir destroyed any possible bond. "I'm just glad I had you, Mom," she would say with a maturity beyond her years. "You were the only one who really knew what was important, family, not bloodlines." Her words simultaneously filled me with pride and profound sadness for the innocence she was forced to let wither at such a young age. But I took solace in knowing I had insulated her from the brunt of their viciousness. Until the day that seismic postscript arrived, brutally textured with karma's fury. It was a simple certified letter that appeared innocuous at first glance. But the return address, a maximum security prison, quickly turned my blood cold. With hands trembling, I tore it open to find a terse, stark message. "Mrs. Redding, I regret to inform you that your former husband, Evan Redding, has been incarcerated on charges of corporate racketeering, embezzlement, and tax evasion related to his business activities." The legalese continued, but my vision blurred as the full weight landed. Evan was going to prison for upwards of a decade, his career and reputation utterly immolated in the wake of those charges. Just like I had threatened all those years ago with my hidden evidence, a thermonuclear strike I'd hoped would never truly be detonated. Clearly, authorities had dug deeper in the aftermath of our brutal divorce and uncovered the full crater of his financial chicanery. The sick twist of satisfaction I felt soured in an instant, replaced by a mix of stunned dismay and something worse, something deeper. Remorse and empathy I didn't want to feel for that wretched man. Because no matter how unforgivable his actions, no matter how much he deserved punishment, I knew this development would utterly shatter Marla. Her whole world, her whole cancerous obsession for continuing the family empire through a male heir, would finally collapse in on itself with Evan incarcerated. She would be alone, bereft, her manipulative power machinations reduced to ashes at last. I tried to stamp out the small tendril of compassion worming through me, reminding myself of her boundless cruelty, her eagerness to obliterate my own family. Yet it persisted, the ghost of the hopeful young bride I had once been, sickened by the realization that Marla had doomed herself and her deepest desire through her very quest to obtain it. Her worldview had been her undoing. The ramifications, of course, would ripple out in unpredictable waves. What would become of their real estate empire and wealth with Evan behind bars? And more urgently, what about Zoe? I was deep in thought, rereading the letter for any clues, when the front door opened and my now-grown daughter swept in from classes. "Hi, Mom. Did you hear from—" She stopped short, taking in my pale, shaken expression. "Mom, what is it? What's wrong?" Drawing a steadying breath, I wordlessly handed her the letter. Zoe's eyes rapidly scanned the contents, her brows shooting upward in disbelief. "Oh my God, Dad's in prison?" She looked up at me, the shock and hurt palpable despite our long estrangement from Evan. I moved to pull her into a comforting embrace, stroking her hair just like when she was little. "I know, honey, I know. It's a lot to process." She held me tightly for a long moment, and I could sense her whirling thoughts settling like sediment through cloudy waters. Finally, she pulled back, eyes resolute and voice steady. "This doesn't change anything for us, Mom. His mistakes, his crimes, that's on him. We've built a good life beyond his mistakes and grandmother's madness." Zoe squeezed my hands firmly, her warm smile crackling with that resilient spirit inherited from her mother's DNA. Maybe this can be the end of it all, a fresh start, free from his shadow and her poison for good. I gazed at her with swelling pride and love, overcome by the wise perseverance blazing in her youthful eyes. She was right. As the monolithic shockwave propagated outward, Evan behind bars, Marla's world crumbling, we stood together on solid ground, free and unshaken. Perhaps this was the final cosmic realignment, setting the scales permanently even. Pulling my brave, beautiful daughter close, I felt the manacles of that dark family history begin to shed like snakeskin at last. Evan and Marla had bet everything on lies and power lust, unwittingly burrowing their shared grave. But in their defeat, in their self-ruination, I had conquered. My quiet resilience, my bond of love with Zoe had won the generational war. My only lingering words as their entitled kingdom crumbled to dust were the same ones I had snarled at Marla so many years ago. "Don't ever set foot near me or my daughter again, because this time it would be permanent."